As I try to mute myself. Welcome into an all-new episode of Panthers on Tap. I'm Curtis Rauen, joined by Bryson, Karbley, and Ricky Raines, coming to you guys on a Wednesday night. I apologize. We are a little late. We were just trying to get some things sorted out here, but we are finally live, coming to you guys after the season finale where the Panthers showed up big. Bryce Young shined in this one. Got to start out like we always do. Ricky, Bryson, how you guys doing tonight?
I'm good. It feels like the weight of the world lifted off my shoulders, not having to watch the Carolina Panthers defense anymore. So, like you mentioned, it was cool to see that last game. Bryce Young got with a bang, left me with a good taste in my mouth for next season. So I'm excited about that and excited to, get together with some of our friends, some reoccurring guests here and talk about the season.
Yeah, Ricky, are you recovering from that leg injury? I was not joking, folks, when I put it out on X that we had literally jumped over a train after this victory. So, Ricky, shine some light into that a little bit.
Yeah. It was jumping over a train like it was like Franklin Street or something, and the Tar Heels had just won the national championship,
Yes, sir.
It was a weird thing. When you're old and you start trying to do the young man's game, you realize real quickly that you're old. So I found out really quickly that I'm not as young as I used to be. But yeah, man, I'm all right. I'm here. Fighting off seasonal colds and everything else. I mean, this is just the time of the year, right? You get through the best holiday in the world, and then all of a sudden you're sick for 2 weeks because you hung out with everybody. But the Panthers got a W, man. And that's all that I really have to hold my hat on right now. So I'm feeling pretty decent.
All right, before we get into our guests real quick, I know Ricky, like he said, he's a little under the weather, so I don't know what he'll tell us what he's drinking here in a minute. I don't know if you guys have brought this on the show. I feel like one of you guys have, so I guess I'm stealing it from you maybe. It's Up to Snow Good. Did someone ever have this? I feel like one of us did. No? It is a winter ale, pretty sweet can. It comes from Middle James Brewing. I believe it's in Pineville, North Carolina. Sticking with the winter drinks, it's a cinnamon vanilla maple flavor. It is damn good. It's a treat. It really is. 6.8%. Very smooth. I recommend this. Bryson, this was actually, I got this at that brewery shop that me, you, and Greg went to that one time. So really good beer. But Bryson, what do you got? What are you drinking?
Yeah, I'm starting with some whiskey from the hills of West Virginia. It is from Mountain State Spirits. I had a little event there through some friends. It is hazelnut honey. It is really good, 65 proof. So it's not super strong, but very dangerous. Very dangerous. Trust me when I say that. Very dangerous. And then I have 2 beers also. I figured I'd go out with a bang, into the season. No names to tie into what happened, but the first beer is Protect Your Neck, Moving on Your Left. It's a hazy IPA from one of my favorite breweries here in Raleigh, Trophy. It again, just a hazy IPA, like I've mentioned 100 times on the show. I've really gotten into those. And then another one I got because it was really cheap. It was $2.99 from a brewery in Brooklyn, New York, a 6 Point brewery. It's called the Piff. It is a double IPA hazy, so I haven't tried that yet in my IPA venture, but I'll let you guys know how it is.
Ricky, what do you got?
I have a Yeti filled with green tea and licorice tea That's it, with a little bit of honey and lemon.
No bourbon.
There's no bourbon even in here, man. This is all natural. I'm just trying to let this thing do its stuff right now.
Fair enough. Before we get to our guests, I do want to let folks know we already have one rolling here, honestly, before we started. So we do appreciate it, but we do have a super chat. If you guys are so inclined and are feeling gracious, we would appreciate it. It's that little money icon in the YouTube channel, and you can send us some cash. We will answer your questions. We'll toast to you, and we do appreciate the support. It goes back into our podcast and making things better for you guys. So we would appreciate it. And I'll just kick things off right away here. And we can kind of talk about this later when we get there. Zachary Hernandez, $20. My offseason wish list is to trade for Garrett Wilson, sign Milton Williams, extend Horn and Moten, draft Abdul Carter, best player available, Kenneth Grant, and center Jared Wilson. The Carolina Reaper is here to stay. Keep pounding. Amen to that last sentence. Zach, we will talk about the draft a little bit later on, but I did want to give you a shout out right away because you literally put this in before this thing got rolling and we were late. So cheers to you, Zach. And we do appreciate the $20.
Cheers, man.
But we got to get into it. We got a lot of guests coming on here this evening. So I want to bring them in here if I can get this thing set up correctly with there we go. And we have JJ and Edgar Salmingo joining us. They've been on this show quite a bit, but it's been a pretty long time. So gentlemen, thank you guys so much for coming on. And I look forward to this long 4 or 5 hour conversation we're about to have. Hopefully it's not that long. I'm just fucking with you guys, but it's good to see you guys because it's been a really long time. I think we came on right before the season started, so it's good to have you guys here. But I just want to jump right into it, and I want to talk about the game this past weekend. So just your guys' overall reactions to what you saw on the field. Offensively, defensively, special teams, coaching wise. We also will have Kevin Avery joining us. He's hard at work. He told me he'd be pulling off to the side of the road to get in here at some point. The guy's traveling across the country with his trucking company. So we might get Kevin in here at some point. But let's start with Edgar. What were your overall observations from this game and this overtime thriller?
I mean, first of all, thanks for having me. Hello, everyone. I mean, the most obvious one is obviously the ascension of Bryce Young. I think it's no coincidence that the game where he was the most expressive was the one he performed the best. Like, I think they go hand in hand. Like the body language, the way he carried himself. Like he literally, after his 20, 25-yard, 30-yard pass to Jatavian Sanders, is just like, he's like, you can't touch me. Like it's almost like the Jordan shrug in Panthers lore right now. It's just like the behind the turnaround, And so I think people are like, I know some people in the chat were saying like, oh, I'm kind of bummed that they dropped in draft positioning, but I felt like it was like a trade off. Like you dropped in draft positioning so that cemented that this is the guy. And if he came out like with a dud against Atlanta and you have a higher draft pick, like we would just be all crazy this offseason thinking about like, what are we going to do at quarterback? Should we trade? Should we do this? Now we're for sure know that Bryce Young is it. And the last thing in terms of the defense, I tweeted it maybe today or yesterday, but I really think Bryce Young saved Ejiro Evero's job because if they lost 38-0, I don't think there's any way Evero is coming back. And so since they won 44-38, they're like, okay, like the vibes are good. Let's just keep going. We're building. But he really masked how bad, the historically bad Panthers defense this year. And so I know there were some changes that we'll talk about later, but on the defense, it was just really, really bad. I appreciate the effort, but move on, rebuild from the ground up because that was pathetic.
JJ, what'd you think of this game this past weekend?
I'm sorry, there was a delay. Did you say something? I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. Just overall observations from the game.
Oh, well, first of all, a little shame because Ashley turned down 2 tickets to go to the game here in from a coworker. And so I felt really ashamed because the reason I turned it down is because I didn't watch the game the week before where we lost 48-14. I was traveling. And so because of that kind of loss and knowing that JC was going to be missing again, I think like two other guys were missing. I just figured we may lay down at the end of the season. It wouldn't be competitive. I didn't want to waste my time going downtown and seeing a non-competitive game. I have zero luck going to games in person in general. And so I didn't go. And I really thought that we were going to lay down. I thought that they were just going to tank it and aim for I think we were tagged for like the 4th or 5th pick at the time. And so I was shocked. I was ashamed initially, after we ended up winning, but I was shocked throughout the game that we were fighting the way that we were fighting. And I was tweeting as much in real time every time Bryce scored another touchdown. So I was overall pleased, though, that we did win, that we went out on a high note. I always want to win. I'm a very competitive guy. And so was happy to see us win, especially here in Atlanta, where I live. And but ultimately, though, in terms of the performances, Bryce Young, I've been very critical of him, throughout this season, especially before he was benched. I thought he deserved to be benched. And, since he's come back, I've been like really critically watching him as he has regained his starting role as the quarterback of the Carolina Panthers. I had missed like 2 of the 3 previous games. And so the last one I actually sat down and watched was the Cowboys game. And we had 4 turnovers that game. He had 4 turnovers that game. So sitting and watching him every snap run this offense, basically go toe-to-toe with Atlanta because we could not stop them with our atrocious defense. But watching Bryce keep us in the game and ultimately, drive us down the field to win the game in overtime, it was very, very satisfying. And as someone who had been really critical of this process of Bryce Young this year, it was humbling, to sit there and watch him have that moment. But I was very happy for him at the end of the day that he picked that moment to have his best game of his career, and everybody saw it. It seemed like everybody around the NFL was watching. They have been watching over the past few weeks, but they're paying attention, and the vibes were good. The way that the media is looking at us now as we end the season is probably at like a 3-season high. It's probably as high as it's been since we had the run we had with Steve Wilkes, in my opinion, in terms of the overall sentiment of the Carolina Panthers. And to me, that's ultimately what it's about, right? I'm one person who does not feel that the Carolina Panthers is a team where everybody, in terms of free agency and the league in general looks at us as a favorable destination. And so we need all the good vibes we can get in order to be attractive to free agents and things like that. And so as we head into the offseason, to end on a high note like we did, for Bryce to perform the way he did against a division foe, some people consider it a rival, but to put a punctuation mark at the end of the season and essentially, regardless of what would have happened, in their season, the way that they went in there with intentionality to do, it was just great to see, man. So I was ashamed that I didn't go, number one, shocked that and then collectively just pleased at us ending on a high note and going in until the 2025 offseason on positive vibes, and hopefully that momentum carries over into something very positive for the whole team as we continue to build.
before we go any further, I do apologize because some folks don't know him by name. They go off of their Twitter handle. So JJ Hardy, you guys know him as Panthers Culture on X. And then Edgar Salmingo, Panthers Analyst on X as well, just to clear that up a little bit. But Bryson, let's go to you. What'd you like in this game?
I like 9. He, like JJ just said, best game of his career. I mean, he was inches away from having 6 touchdowns in this game. I think he clearly, through the last 10 weeks of the season, showed that he has the ability to be the franchise quarterback moving forward. He answered a big question that this team had after the first 2 weeks of the season at that position. To go through what Bryce Young went through with this franchise after year 1 and the turmoil around the coaching staff and the lack of offensive line and being benched, to ending the season on what he did in Atlanta, going toe-to-toe, going in overtime. When the Panthers won that toss, I knew the Panthers won the game. That's how confident I was in Bryce through that game this past Sunday. So I'm not going to talk about the defense. Terrible. We all know that. Gave up most points in NFL history. That's never a good thing. But I do want to end it on just some Bryce Young stats through the last 10 weeks of the season. Tied for first in big-time throw percentage. Tied second in big-time throws. Tied for third in average depth per target. Fourth in deep throw passing grade, 20 yards plus. Fifth in overall passing grade. Fifth in passing grade under pressure. Sixth in offensive grade in the league for the last 10 weeks. He is playing like a top 5 quarterback through the last 10 weeks of the season. And I think that's what we all wanted. Even JJ, who doesn't like Bryce Young, wanted that. I'm just messing with you, JJ. But no, I know you're happy, man, because it's your team, right? And you just want to see success. And Bryce Young gave us that. I mean, it didn't result in a whole lot of wins. I think all of us can agree primarily because of the defense. But, this offseason, there's a clear, plan. I think we can all see it. Improve the defense, get a weapon, and go. Dave Canales, hell of a job coaching this year. I was extremely hard on him throughout the season. Thought he made a lot of questionable decisions and play calling and things like that. But when you boil it down, he helped Bryce Young get to where he's at now. And Bryce Young is a franchise quarterback. Like I said, moving forward, we have our quarterback. And I think because of that, this season was successful in my eyes because Bryce Young is him. He really is. And fuck that Craig guy. Whatever his name is that did that video of saying that he was like a 5'1" slot receiver.
Couldn't wait to get to the Bryce Young. Fuck
that guy. He has a show on Fox Sports 1 in New York or something. He's just a small, angry, bald guy that I don't know. I guess Bryce Young did something to him, but it was personal between him and Bryce Young, and Bryce Young proved him wrong. So fuck that guy.
Don't give him engagement, Bryson.
Before we go to Ricky, just shout out. Alex changes his name every week, so I don't know who that is. This Alex here?
Yeah.
Can you let's see? $9.99. We do appreciate it, Alex. He says for your ability to get awesome guests. I do agree with that wholeheartedly. Edgar and JJ are fantastic. But Ricky, man, we watched the game this weekend in Charlotte. It was like a roller coaster ride. We were hitting hands and pissed off in parts, and just walk me through that game. What'd you think of it? And how well do you think Bryce Young played in this one?
It was a really interesting game to me. First, Edgar and JJ, good to see you guys again. So for me, man, it was like this set up perfectly to run into the classic Carolina Panthers scenarios, right? Every time that we would let them get a redo on a play, right? You get a little bit of pressure. You force them into a 3rd and long or a 2nd and long, and all of a sudden you give them a redo and they make you pay for it, right? 3rd and 20, they get a touchdown. And you walk into all these situations and it's like we knew that all the bad stuff was going to happen. But then at the very most pivotal moment of the game, when it probably would have been the most Carolina Panther thing in the world to lose that game in overtime, taking them in there, maybe an Eddie Pinheiro missed kick. I don't know, something that just feels very homey and familiar, right? But instead, Bryce Young, who had a outstanding day, like no matter how you want to shake it, man, and he left a little bit out there, right? Like even when we were watching the game, there was a couple throws that he even completed that Curtis, you and I were sitting there, is like, he honestly could have even made that a better throw and probably ended up with a touchdown on that play instead of, a pass that dies down on the 5-yard line. But he's making plays. He's not taking sacks. He's not playing timid. He's making decisions. One of the things that I walked away with that game feeling, honestly, though, this is where Bryce Young is starting to have an individual effect on everybody on the team, I think. And I'm starting to see that you saw it in like the Kansas City game. You saw it in the Philadelphia game, that his personal attitude when he's playing with confidence and he gets that little bit of like, it's not even swagger, man. It's just like an ultra belief that he has in himself, that when he starts playing with it, it is infectious, man. And I don't think that we've had a leader from the quarterback spot. And this is no knock on like Baker and Teddy Bridgewater, because I think that they are leader type players, but they didn't have long enough to establish themselves here in Carolina. And the situations were always very unfavorable. Like there just wasn't a really great situation for someone to be the leader there. I think that Bryce Young has an opportunity to become the leader at the quarterback position, and he's playing pretty good football right now. If this can continue into some consistency, man, that game, that's the blueprint. That if your offense can play like that, and Dave Canales, don't second guess yourself, play with a little bit of self-belief as well. You know what I mean? He kind of let things go on this one. And I think that he should keep playing like that. Play a little bit free and don't be so rigid sometimes with the philosophies. I think that we're starting to see some tendencies with his trick plays and going for passing in some situations where maybe he would typically go run. And I'm liking what I'm seeing, man, a little bit of evolution. So feels really good to end the season on a win. A couple things you could take away from it. And if Bryce Young keeps ascending, man, we're all going to be happy, I think.
Sorry, I just want to drop this down here for a second. Boys, we got us a quarterback. I mean, that's what I came away from this game. You got to see really Bryce Young flourish into what many of us saw at Alabama. His escapability, the magician type QB play, him running with the ball and almost being slippery at times to get in there into the end zone on a couple runs. And then, like Ricky said, he was not afraid. And honestly, these last, really since the benching and when he came back, he has been taking more deep shots. And you saw that on display this game. The one play that I know Ricky and I both marveled at, I think, Ricky, you put it out on X actually after the game, was that throw to JT Sanders. I mean, that was kind of that redemption one that you talked about against Bates. And just a rocket shot up the sideline at a pivotal point in the game. Honestly, I think it was first in line. I think it was like 1st and 20. They had just come off of a penalty, and Bryce Young rips it.
It was 1st and 25, and you and I both at that point in that game, we were like, that's it. Like, they're going to end up not getting this first down because of what they just did here with this boneheaded
penalty. And in the past, typically that happened.
And in the past, that would have been it, man. Yeah.
So you saw that throughout. I do want to give a shout out to Adam Thielen. As much as everyone wants to give him shit about his speed, the guy can really, I mean, he's outstanding when the ball is thrown his way, and he can't, like, he's coming down with it more times than not. And some of the plays he made this past week, the one kind of diving up in the air that he caught, I can't remember at what point. There was one on the sidelines on a 3rd and 9 that Bryce ripped in there. And he's been making plays all year. He really has. And his connection with Bryce has been undeniable. Jalen Coker deserves a shout out. He made some outstanding plays in traffic in this game. So yeah, a lot of good, I thought too. I mean, for these guys might not know if they haven't listened in a bit, but I know our chat knows about the donut. Canales brought that out this week and made it work. And we saw some trick plays. If you went to training camp, I mean, there was a lot of times where Canales liked that flea flicker pass in training camp, and you got to see that. Adam Thielen had one. I think it was to Sanders maybe. Late
David
in the
Moore
game.
saved an interception on one where he grabbed the guy's face mask. I thought that was the best penalty you could take ever.
Yeah, I mean, there was, and even honestly, the one to Sanders I thought might have gotten picked. So, I mean, those things could have went sideways. Like we could be looking at this and Atlanta could have been picking that off and we're sitting here pissed off. But they fell our way this time. So that was good to see because I feel like in the past, those kind of went to the wayside when they've tried to be smart with it. So yeah, overall, just I thought it was outstanding play, and I kind of agree with you, Bryce. And the minute they won that coin toss in overtime, I was pretty damn confident the way Bryce Young was playing in that game that they were going to go down and march it down and put it in the end zone. So it's good. It's finally good to see the NFL talking highly about this team for once, and hopefully, like JJ said, that can attract some people our way. On both sides of the ball because they do need it. There's a ton of holes. Let's talk for a minute, just trying to go through some of the chat here as I'm talking. Do you guys think?
Going crazy in the chat right now.
Yeah, it's hard to keep up. So if you guys can keep an eye on that, Ricky and Bryson, for me, because it's hard. But let's talk about the defense here because we've lauded the offense here the last 27 minutes, and we do appreciate what we got 570 people listening right now. We do appreciate every single one of you. Our guests have a lot to do that, so we thank you guys for tuning in and coming on here. And if you don't subscribe to our YouTube channel, I'll shamelessly plug it right now. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel if you don't. But let's talk about the elephant in the room because I know you guys are itching to talk about that, and we've kind of alluded to that a little bit here. But Ejiro Evero, I mean, I think everyone, maybe besides me, wanted Evero gone, and he returns to this team. So I will give the floor to the guy who just gave me the most confused look ever, JJ. And tell me what was your reaction when this came down, and why didn't they get rid of him, I guess. Go ahead.
Well, first of all, I was giddy on Monday morning, hoping and waiting for the notification that we had fired Edgar Salmingo. And let me say this about it, it's not because I want to see a man lose his job. I think Evero is a great guy. I was excited when we hired him last season. Evero came up in Vic Fangio's defense, which I believe in. For me, I see a lot of talk on the timeline about the 3-4 versus the 4-3 and, how we need to get back to a 4-3. I remember there was a time where I wanted to go to a 3-4, right? And Evero came to us, as a hot defensive coordinator from Denver. He was a head coach candidate. Tepper really liked this interview in 2023. And so, I was happy to be able to snatch him, in that cycle. And I hope that, he would bring that Fangio style defense, after seeing what he had did in Denver in 2022. And so I want to start it all by saying I did have belief in Evero. And honestly, I entered 2024 thinking that Evero's place on this staff was going to be really beneficial to Dave Canales. Because he was returning in year 2, he had a chance to, be able to pick guys, that would fit his scheme after he experimented with some of the talent here in 2023. And though we lost a lot of talent, by losing Frankie Louvu, Brian Burns, even though he didn't use him, Jeremy Chin, Jeremy Chin was a dog for us until Evero got to him. But I was kind of an apologist for that last season, thinking that, if Chin couldn't cover, then he probably didn't belong out there in the secondary. I think after we replaced those guys, with the guys that fit Evero's scheme that had history with him, Josie Jewell, Jordan Fuller, Ashawn Robinson, just to name some of the key guys that people recognize and saw play. I really thought that Evero could replace, the guys that we lost and still have a pretty productive unit. I didn't expect for us to be a dominant defense. I just expected for us to stay in the same ballpark of the type of defense we had in 2023. And I've said this for years. One of the worst things for me when watching football is watching my favorite team be a team who cannot stop the run to save their lives. Like, I don't know if people remember when Steve Wilkes was here, that was his biggest thing was, the way that you demoralize a team is run the ball on them, right? And if you can run the ball on them and just break their spirit, then you pretty much have them. And I felt like that happened to us almost every game. And so to end the season on a high note, because Bryce Young played the way he did, for us to end, with the win in Atlanta, all that stuff was great. But I think the low note of the whole process was we broke the NFL record for the most points scored against in a season. And despite what I feel about Ejiro Evero, despite what I thought he could do, who I thought he could be for the Carolina Panthers, I look at him as being the only person in this new aligned staff between head coach and general manager and everybody that Canales brought with him to build his staff up. I look at Evero as the only person who doesn't belong. And I hate to say it like that, but he didn't pick him. He was paired with him. And the thing that you got to have in football is complementary ball. And right now, I don't feel his defense, although, yes, they're missing talent. People got hurt. Derek Brown was our defensive leader. He got hurt first game of the season. All that is true. But to be historically bad on defense, I don't think in this day and age, there should be grace given to that. But that's just me. So ultimately, I'm just disappointed because I don't think adding 2 or 3 players, that gets, starting contributions in 2025 will do enough to add to the defense to take us to a level where I think the expectation should be for Evero in his 3rd year. I mean, we can get a first-round pick. We can add a veteran, to the defensive line or a linebacker core or secondary, whatever. I just don't think it's going to be enough to turn us around quick enough, to not have made a change this year when I think there's a lot of defensive coaches who are available who could come in and potentially change the culture on the defensive side of the football more so than I think Evero can do. So I'll stop it there because I know a lot of people got to go, but that's why I gave you the head shake, Curtis. And in addition to that, is because, man, you're always the person who wants to hang on to guys longer than we need to hang on to them. You was a Matt Rule apologist. You were. The only person you really want to get rid of was Frank Reich. But everybody else,
You're right. I wanted to get rid of Frank Reich. See, I don't hold on that long.
That's your only guy, but you see, I remember them. But yeah, that's why I shook my head at you like that, because you always want to hang on to guys longer than they need to be hung on to.
I'll rebuttal once everyone goes, but Mike Hollinger says we just want to shut out with a playoff contender. It felt great. Remember when we couldn't score 19? What a way to end the season on a high note. Appreciate it, Mike. You guys, the guests don't have to cheer, but us 3 up top here will definitely cheer. We appreciate you, Mike.
Cheers.
All right, let's go to Ricky here. I know you were pretty shocked about this because we had talked about this during the game on Sunday a little bit, kind of throughout. But just thoughts on keeping Evero around.
Evero is very obviously well thought of and well respected. And I don't think that that's even just a Carolina Panthers sentiment. I think that around the league, there seems to be a pretty positive feeling about Ejiro Evero as a person and who he is as a coach, and at least who he has learned to be a coach from. I mean, he has a terrific coaching tree that he is very close with. And JJ spoke to being a Fangio disciple, right? and how there are people that can run that defense to an extremely high level, and it's very effective. Vic Fangio, no coincidence, is doing a terrific job running his defense in Philly, right? Like that was a world of difference when he came in there and actually started executing it. But what he's doing too is he's got 4-man fronts. He runs multiple fronts. He's not running just a base 3-4. He's not running just a base 4-3. He will use multiple defensive fronts. And I think that's something that with Evero, when they talk about adjusting the scheme a little bit, if that's something that he's more willing to kind of be flexible with and maybe tailor that personnel to those ideas, then maybe he can do something with this team with a little bit of talent infused in. Maybe he can do something better. But I think that depends a lot on his willingness to do things differently than what he's been doing. And up to this point, I don't really think that he has seemed wildly open to doing things different than what he wants to do them. And for me, that's usually where I start having issues with a coach, because I like the adaptability and being flexible and saying, we've got this player that's not your traditional linebacker. He's not traditional safety. I'm not exactly sure what to do with him, but he's incredibly athletic. He's a ball player. He can make impact plays. We got to figure out how to get the most out of him instead of being scared and not knowing what to do with him. So when you talk about Evero's prospects in the future, the only thing I worry about is who is he bringing in? We talked about this last week. Is he going to attract high-end free agents to come here? Because I think that free agents are how you're going to make an immediate difference with this defense. Asking a rookie to come in, even if it's with pick 8, asking a rookie to come in and save this defense that is historically bad, I think is setting up that rookie to have a world of pressure on his shoulders. And if it's not a crazy difference right away, you're going to have a lot of unfair, judgment placed on that new 21-year-old football player for the Carolina Panthers, when really it's the third year of Ejiro Evero not figuring out what to do with the rest of his personnel. I hope it works out, but I'm a little bit nervous about continuing on with things that are historically not working out.
Bryson?
Yeah, I'm conflicted, man. Like JJ mentioned, I was excited to bring him in, and I thought we saw some glimpses last season of what his defense can do, even with lack of talent. Those numbers were a little skewed, like we've talked about in the past, but I thought I saw some things that were promising. And he got head coaching interviews and interviewed for the head coaching job here in Carolina. I think even you and I, Curtis, agreed. Like if they wound up hiring him as the head coach, we would have been fine with that here in Carolina. But this season it's hard to look past. Being historically bad, I don't know. If I went to my boss and made all these mistakes week in and week out and just was the worst person ever at my job, I don't know if I'd have a job still. So I guess it speaks to the respect that he has, not only in Carolina but across the league, like JJ mentioned, and the hope. I guess I don't know. They made some moves which we're going to get into later, firing some people on that defensive side of the ball, but he's on a short leash going into next season. Like if the defense comes out week 1, week 2, week 3 and really struggles, like, do we really want to deal with the headache of, okay, are they going to fire Evero now? Are they going to make a move on defense and change things up and get someone new? Like, I think keeping him is risky based off of what we've seen this season. And, hopefully it pays off, but it's not really something I would want hanging over my head going into year 2 with Canales, year 3 with Bryce Young, and that side of the ball looking so good, and really just focusing on the defense and hoping that it gets better, because going from historically bad, like literally the worst ever, to improving it's easy and it's hard at the same time, because it's literally only up from here. But where do you start, and who makes that difference? So with a team full of holes and really just kind of rolling out the same staff primarily on that side of the ball, you have your work cut out for you. But I think if I was in that front office, I would have made a different decision going into year 2 with Canales, and really, like you mentioned, Curtis, getting someone that is paired or maybe has a relationship with Canales instead of just, okay, this is who's here. He did decent last year, keep him, kind of thing on the defensive side of the ball. So I think I'm hopeful that things work out and that, you know, they made the right decision, but I don't have high hopes very much for that side of the ball.
I'm not going to go yet, but I will say I believe Dave Canales gloated about Evero when he came in, and he gloated about him this week and about his holding his offense to 9 points last year. I don't think Evero doesn't like this guy, and I honestly think Canales is the reason Evero is still here. And if it was Tepper's way, Evero is gone. I will lay into that a little bit more here in a little bit. But Edgar, go ahead. What's your thoughts on Evero sticking around?
Yeah, I'm also torn like Bryson. I mean, it's less than a year ago we were just begging, like, Evero, please come back, don't leave. You know, like the whole fan base on Twitter is like just begging for him to come back because there was no quick decision at that time that he was coming back or not. And so we're just like, please don't go. And then he comes out and performs the worst ever. And so, like what Bryson said, I think about like a salesperson, right? Like, hey, sorry, boss, I made 0 sales this year. Bring me back next year. You know, it's just like there has to be, like, for me, like I know JJ's here, but it's like a culture thing, right? Like, let's hold some accountability, right? If you don't do your job, this is what happens. I don't want this system where it's like, remember what happened to Bryce at the beginning of the year? You were terrible. You go to the bench, right? I know we can't bench Evero, but like the same thing, like there are consequences for not doing your job. And so, and then on top of that, like Evero is not Canales' guy, right? Canales was hired and he just retained Evero. Like he didn't come in with Evero. And so even though there's an attachment or a bond between them because they work together, like they never worked together beforehand. And so I don't think, I think I know JJ and I talk about this all the time. Like we love like, I'm missing the word right now, but like we love like when things alignment is what I'm looking for, right? Like someone who goes, and for better or for worse, like I kind of wish that Canales had an asshole for a defensive coordinator because like I don't want 2 Boy Scouts. Like I need an angel, I need a devil. I need like the good cop, I need the bad cop, right? And so like I see a guy like Aaron Glenn, or I see a guy like, you know, just someone that's like gonna light some fire. Because like honestly, like the worst part, like JJ said, is that they couldn't stop the goddamn run, like 200 yards every week. And so like these guys, if you have a guy in your face saying like stop the run, like when Steve Wilkes was the guy, like people are going to be afraid and they're going to do it. And obviously they're playing for their jobs, and there's more than this than just a coach yelling at you. But like you give up every week 200 yards rushing and you have no shame and you're just like, you know, oh, that's, you know, oh, the front office could have given us more guys or whatever. It's like there's no excuses in the NFL. Like there's nowhere to hide. He wanted, you know, for better for worse, A'Shawn Robinson, Josie Jewell, Jordan Fuller, Nick Scott. These were all his guys from previous regimes, right? He got the defense that he wanted. Shai Tuttle came back. Like, for better for worse, even though Derek Brown was injured, J.C. Horn was there for the whole year. Luckily, Mike Jackson saved them. If he didn't have Mike Jackson, it would have looked even worse. I think that just to like take this team to the next level, they could have used like an infusion. If you think of the defense as another team, just start over, build from scratch, get young, get deeper, and get a new defensive coordinator. Because now, like what Bryson said, if something happened in the first couple of weeks and he's gone, it's like, man, we're just starting. Like we could have just done this earlier, which is the same thing that happened with Matt Rule. We fired him in the middle of the year. They're like, gosh darn it, like you should have just done it at the very beginning and get this over with and clean up. And so I hate personally half measures. I don't think firing the safeties coach and the outside linebackers coach is like the threats that people think, like the improvement that people think it is. I really think Evero, he's not a dummy. I think at his best, he's average to above average. It's not like he lost his skills. Like I think this is just him. I think like he's better off like we're better off starting rebuilding, get a new guy, start off from scratch, get some depth. Because now that he's coming back and now he knows that his ass is on the line, that means this defense is going to be built with like expensive free agents, getting some people in there for better or for worse. There was already one of the oldest defenses. Like that defense was filled with veterans. I know we talk about like, oh man, like you're filling this with a whole bunch of undrafted free agents and this guy. Like there are a lot of veterans on that defense. These are not like spring chickens. You got Xavier Woods, Jordan Fuller, all the people who were playing, Mike Jackson. They were all in there. And they were all like have been there for a while. And so like if you cannot raise the level of veterans on your defense, like again, you're better off like starting anew and getting fresh, and then you'll get a good grace like when the defense struggles next year. But starting next year, it's kind of like you got a short leash, and if you suck, then like we should have done this, and we got to start all over with a new personnel. You might switch a system, no half measures. You should have done it earlier.
Hold on, you guys all talked for about 20 minutes, so it's my turn. So first
Sorry,
off, Ricky's comment about worried about bringing in guys, and that is somewhat of a concern for me. I think my biggest gripe, and we've talked about this last couple episodes, is letting Frankie Louvu get away. Because that was a guy that, Carolina really molded and built up his career. And then he kind of went because he wanted to play with Dan Quinn. And then he also lost Jeremy Chin in the process. But Ricky had made a comment about bringing in free agents. And I think while you think that might be a struggle, we also kind of said the same thing last year about some of these offensive guys, and it might just be something where you might have to overpay a little bit on the defensive side of the ball to get some of these guys in if you're concerned about that. So I still think you can bring in valuable players on defense free agent wise. It just might have that price tag that Carolina dealt with on the offensive side of the ball this past year. But in Evero's defense, you look at this defense this offseason, what they spent defensively. I get the argument that Evero brought in some of his own guys. We want to complain about Jordan Fuller, which it's deserved. We want to complain about Nick Scott. But we don't ever want to talk about Josie Jewell that they brought in, a guy who I thought was not going to be very good and had a really good second half of the year. We don't want to talk about the guy, Ashawn Robinson, who was under him as well in LA, who had a pretty damn good year and was the sack leader. So if you're going to knock those picks, you gotta build up and talk about the picks that he did bring in. I also think while some of those guys were his guys, they were also at a very cheap cost. They didn't give him a lot of money to work with on the defensive side of the ball. The focus this past offseason was the offense. They overpaid for 2 guards. They spent money on that side of the ball, and you signed 2 safeties that were $1 million and $3 million. You know what the safety market is for a top safety is about $20 million. So in that room, you brought back Xavier Woods and you brought back Jordan Fuller and Nick Scott, and they were on the cheap. You don't think Evero, if they would have given a bigger budget, he went out and got some better guys than those 2? I think he would have. So when you guys want to attack that, and I get it, like I get those guys were under his system, but if he was given a bigger budget, he probably would have went out and got some better guys. So that's to that. And then I had tweeted this out after the game because I know this is a very unpopular opinion. I get the stats. You can throw them at me. The run defense was terrible. I understand that. But they stripped this defense. They lost 5 starters. They lost their best pass rusher. They brought in 2 guys to help fill that in Jadeveon Clowney and Wanham. One of those guys didn't play until about week 7 or 8. And they left, and then they brought in some bottom of the barrel talent because they didn't have a big budget on the defensive side of the ball. So the personnel coming in was shallow. There was no depth on defense whatsoever. Then you lose Derek Brown the first game, your best defensive player. You went out and traded for a corner the week before the season. You had no starting corner opposite JC Horn a week before the season started. You went out and panicked and went out and got a guy in Mike Jackson in Seattle that saved your ass in that season to go out and get him. You didn't have a second corner. Oh, and by the way, everyone wants to talk about Dane Jackson. That was Dan Morgan's guy. Dan Morgan brought him here. That wasn't Evero's guy. That was Dan Morgan who said he thought who played well in Buffalo, and they brought him here, and he was garbage. So then they had to panic and go get a second corner opposite JC Horn a week before the season, had no experience with JC, and ended up panning out. Honestly, they got really lucky. But the depth behind every single one of those guys they picked up in free agency, it was 0. It was terrible. Bottom of the league. And I brought this up to these guys last week. Go look at that starting depth chart 2 weeks ago. And I gave them starting week 2 or 3. Go look at the depth chart. I'll give you guys week 3 to now. How many guys on this starting defense would start for other teams? And I think we came up with 4 or 5, maybe 6 starters that would start on other teams. The rest, and that's just the starters. I don't even talk about the depth behind them when someone goes down. None of those guys will be playing on other teams. Oh, and by the way, this last week when they gave up 40 points and made Michael Penix look good, they had Bartholomew, a Caleb Evans, Caleb Farley, Cam Gill, and LeBrian Ray. Are any of those guys starting on any other roster on the NFL? I'll give you the short answer. Fuck no. They're terrible players. This defense, and I'm glad Dan Morgan fell on the sword because he needed to. He did not give Evero the personnel for this defense to work. And I get it. We wanted Evero to work magic this season. What we saw him last year with the turnstile in the secondary, and he did a decent job. The defense wasn't as good as the stats showed last year. I wholeheartedly agree with that. But he did a decent job when all those corners went down last year to bring in guys off the street and make it work. And we all thought it was going to happen this year. Bryson thought it was going to happen. He talked about it in summer that Evero would help this defense out no matter what was on that roster on that side of the ball. We've all discussed that. And you know what? He couldn't work the magic because these guys just weren't good. And I think if they bring in the right personnel, Evero didn't forget how to coach overnight. He had a very solid defense in Denver. And then when he came here, he had I would say, middle-of-the-road defense. The stats showed otherwise. They showed they were in the top 10. I think there was some lacking based off of how the offense played last year. But you got to give this guy some players, man. And I think they're going to do that this offseason. And you know what? If they're dog shit this year, let him go and bring in someone else. But I think this guy didn't forget how to coach overnight, and I don't think he's had the proper personnel this season and deserves some slight. Now, there needs to be changes, no doubt about it. That he needs to be able to adapt. He needs to be able to put guys in the right position. I'm hoping personnel-wise that's going to allow him to maybe use J.C. Horn playing a little bit more man-to-man and following some of these really good top-end wide receivers when you actually have a secondary that's decent where you can do that. But until that happens, we're going to be in the same spot. You need to go out and fix this defense from the top down. And it's going to take a lot. It's going to take a lot of money. It's going to take draft picks. But I'll tell you what, if Evero was fired, that guy would have a defensive coordinator job in a week. The guy would have been hired. Carolina turned down so many teams last year that wanted a lateral move for him. The Green Bay Packers were looking at him. There was a couple other teams, too, that wanted him as their DC, and Carolina denied them. So this guy would have a job in an instant if he was fired because he is a good defensive coordinator. He needs the personnel, and I'm hoping Dan Morgan realizes that. I think he does because he did fall on the sword this week and said we didn't give him the right good enough players. It's basically what he said. So that's my gripe about it.
I got a question for you.
To rebuttal, go ahead.
Yeah, I got a question. All right, so they lost 5 starters from Evero's first season, right? And replaced those starters with a collective of players, some of which played in Evero's system, some of which didn't. I think only one in Dane Jackson. They brought in Josie Jewell, who played extremely well. They brought in A'Shawn Robinson, who played well. And then obviously we know how bad the safeties were. But going from year one with Evero and the defense being statistically a top 10 defense, losing 5 starters and replacing them with players that have experience in your system, that have played well in your system before, is that an excuse to go from a statistically top 10 defense to the worst in NFL history?
No.
Yeah. You had bad personnel and you had no depth. You had no depth whatsoever.
Well, you could say that about both sides of the ball with no depth. I mean, the wide receiver room, we were looking at David Moore.
The offense didn't deal as much with injuries as the defense did. I mean, you lost Shaq Thompson, and I forgot to mention Shaq Thompson. You lost Shaq Thompson and you lost Derek Brown 3 games into the year. and there was no depth behind him. You brought in a rookie linebacker who a lot of people believed was overdrafted in the 3rd round, and you had no answer for losing Derek Brown because there was no one on the defensive line, even with the starters, because you had Wanham not even in there, and you had no one opposite Clowney. So
Well, did you? And then, let me ask a question though. Did you have Shaq Thompson last year?
No.
You didn't. So you didn't lose anything because you don't know.
But you also had Frankie Louvu. You had also Frankie Louvu.
You lost Frankie Louvu. I mean, I think to Bryce's point, we replaced 5 starters with 5 guys who were starters where they came from with experience in Evero's system. I'm not saying they are 1-for-1 talent-wise, but when you replace guys with Josie Jewell, who's a starting linebacker in Denver, you have Jordan Fuller, who's a starting safety in LA. You have DJ Wanham, although he did miss a lot of the season, he was a starting edge in Minnesota, right? So it's not like you are replacing starters with second level guys. Like, these guys come with starting experience. They played a lot of football. They played the Evero system. I think the thing that frustrates me most about Evero, and I think Ricky touched on this earlier, or maybe it was Edgar, as you're sitting there watching the game, we giving up historic levels of points each and every week. I look at, and I'm not comparing him to this guy, but I watched Minnesota quite a bit this year for fantasy football purposes. But while I'm watching them, I'm looking at what Brian Flores is doing with that defense. Man, I mean, I think the most astounding thing in watching the Vikings play defense is that when you look across their roster, Harrison Smith at 35 years old is like their only star. There's no elite corner. There's no other elite safety. There's no elite second-level guy. Van Ginkel might be the best player on their front 7, and they picked up the guy Greener from the Texans last year, who was looked at as a downgrade from Daniel Hunter, right? And so, to me, I'm looking at talent level, and people don't look at Minnesota as having bad talent because they are outplaying their talent because of who their defensive coordinator is. And I think the reason that they're outplaying their talent is because Brian Flores is so freaking aggressive. He's run blitzing. He's putting all kind of like complex and pressures on the quarterback. Guys are coming from everywhere you don't know. Like, he's confusing quarterbacks each and every week. He's attacking the run, and he's doing it with guys who are not household names, right? And I would say if you go across there, if you just look up their depth chart and look at their starting guys.
I'm gonna, because I don't agree with you that they're.
I mean, you don't have to. You don't have to, but there are not a lot of household names on Minnesota's defense. We know Harrison Smith, Notre Dame guy, and we know a couple of the other guys on that team. Greener, who was a late bloomer in Houston, and we know Van Ginkel, who wasn't like a superstar in Miami. I think Flores did a great job, and I'll give my my guy Adolfo. I think they did a great job of putting players in Flores' defense who he could be aggressive with. And I think they just leaned on the gas from a defensive standpoint and stayed mad aggressive all year long. And not saying that we would have had the same success if we had done that, but I think the part that sucks is that we sit and watched our defense suck week in, week out. And we were never, I won't say never, but rarely ever aggressive. If you're going to give up the most points in league history, then you should have done it aggressive. Go out swinging. We just sat back and took the punches.
Did you watch some of the blitzes?
Yeah, I seen some of the blitzes. I seen JC get home, first sack in his career.
Yeah, because half the players weren't good enough to fucking blitz. I mean, you could disguise all you want. I mean, these guys weren't good enough to make the play. That's the problem.
Like Trevin Wallace he was a good blitzer in college. He was a good blitzer in college. Send him on pressure. Send Josie Jewell. Josie Jewell can blitz. Like, send Josie when he was healthy. Do whatever you got to do to be aggressive and try to stop these guys, because just sitting back and playing your base defense. Like, I saw a stat early in the season where we ran the highest percentage of cover 3 in the NFL. Like 50+%. We did, we sat in cover 3 zone.
Mm-hmm.
it's okay if you're doing it at a great level. I know Seattle did that, with Pete Carroll back in the day. But, it's two things. Almost everybody's figured out cover 3 in the NFL nowadays. So that's number one. But two, if you're going to do it, right, you need to have like a Cam Chancellor type that's coming up and smashing people, but we don't have that. We didn't have a big nickel. We don't have a line of scrimmage safety because we didn't play that guy. We let him walk in free agency. And so we tried to deploy a defense that was ineffective in stopping the run. We were like Edgar said, we letting guys run 200 plus yards per week on us on defense, and you're doing nothing to be aggressive. Like, I would rather blitz the line of scrimmage, put 8 in the box so you can stop that, and just let them just beat us in the pass game, because that's easier to stomach than letting somebody just bludgeon you to death. And now you are flipping the game and you're taking the game out of the hands of your quarterback, no matter who was playing, Bryce or Andy Dalton. And it's just a hard watch. And those hard watches lead to frustrated fans and misguided anger. And so I'm saying when it comes to Evero, I just believe that if you were worth your salt, right, you should have adapted. You should have did more to adapt to the players that you did have, and did more to affect the outcomes of games than you did, in terms of being aggressive. I don't think he was aggressive enough, even in this game versus Atlanta. I mean, I love Michael Penix. Everybody knows that. I like to scout these young guys at quarterback. But there's no way that a rookie quarterback in his third game should have been marching up and down the field against us. We didn't make anything hard for him. He was sitting back and just picking what he wanted. We were lucky to get an interception off of deflection, but I mean, Evero.
He should have had two. He should have had two.
He should have had two, but he still picked apart our defense. And I don't think an experienced defensive coordinator like Evero, even with the guys we had, I know we have a bunch of replacements.
I want to ask you guys this, and this can be real quick. Do you think he was given the proper personnel this year to be a successful DC?
Yeah.
Can be yes or no. Can be yes or no. You don't have to give me a reasoning.
Yes.
Edgar, he was given the proper personnel to be an effective defensive coordinator.
I'll say no because I want them all gone, but I will say that he had a say in who was in the personnel. And that's why I also think that if somebody's going to be held accountable, if it really was the personnel, then why are you firing the safeties coach and the outside linebacker? Shouldn't you be firing someone in scouting or pro scouting or whatever? If that's the issue, then we shouldn't be firing a safeties coach. What are we doing here?
Bryson?
I would say yes. I know you said don't give reasoning, but I'm going to give a little bit because I think that there was enough talent there to not be the worst defense in NFL history.
Ricky?
Yep.
Thank you. You followed the prompt. Also, because JJ and Edgar did not answer my question, does Bartholomew, Evans, Farley, Gill, and Ray start on any other roster?
Well, I think
Bartholomew played very good.
It's yes or no, guys. Did any of those guys?
Did you say Evans?
Bartholomew, Evans, Farley, Gill, Ray.
Evans had starting experience in Minnesota, so yes, I would say he has started before. I know Bartholomew was an undrafted free agent, I believe, that we looked at early in the year and we brought up. So I can't say that he would start with anybody because he had never even got drafted. Who did you say? Who were the other guys?
Caleb Farley, first round pick.
I mean, but Curtis, you asked me the question about somebody who was finally elevated to play in Week 18. Farley has started in this league before he had the injury.
Farley's been playing the last 3 weeks and got his ass kicked.
But
that's what I'm talking about. These guys are cut from the Tennessee Titans. We're talking bottom of the barrel practice squad guys, and we're trying to consider. And we're talking about these guys.
Farley was not drafted. Farley wasn't drafted in the first round and started for the Tennessee Titans. He didn't.
Yeah, but he's been dealing with. No one wanted him. I mean, Carolina picked him up off waivers. This guy was. I thought Farley could give him a chance here, and look, he hasn't he's been bad.
You think it's fair to just trash him and say he can't play football anymore because he was on the practice squad all year and finally got elevated when everybody.
Well, I watched him get his ass kicked from week in and week out the last 3 or 4 weeks when he's been out there. So yeah, I do.
So we completely out on Farley now because he can't play. He can't.
I'm completely out on most of these guys on defense because they've been dog shit. Yeah, I have been.
but not the coordinator that was coaching them the whole season.
No, because
How
I've
did they
seen
do-
Evero. I've seen Evero with talent on his defensive side be good, and that's this guy didn't forget how to coach the defense overnight. He hasn't had the first.
What was Evero's best defensive performance of his career? Even going back to last year, what would you say? What stands out? Like, what was the game?
I can't pick that out of a hat. I'd have to go back and actually look. I don't know.
But I'm saying, like, he made you a believer. I'm just saying, like, it had to be some game where he was like, man, we were stellar on defense because Evero, like, just totally schooled that coach, that team. I mean, I have a game that I can pick out without thinking back a lot, but it was against a rookie quarterback.
I mean, that's fair. I honestly can't go back and look. I don't know, but I'm just telling you,
because he hasn't been that. I mean, this is the thing, and I'm saying this like not forgetting that I was excited about him. But the one thing I had concerns about with Evero's scheme was even when he was in Denver, the one thing they did in Denver during the year he was there, they traded away my man Chubb. They traded him to the Dolphins. He was their top pass rusher.
And that defense didn't skip a beat in Denver.
They did not skip a beat, but the one thing they did not do either was generate a lot of pass rushing pressure, right? So they was hell bent on stopping the run, and they could generate pressures from multiple looks and like putting their biggest guy and at end and like blitzing off of that. He was a little bit more aggressive in Denver than he has been in Carolina. But at the end of the day, this is going to Ricky's point. In terms of attracting guys who can even come in and play. If you want to get a guy who's good at playing edge, right? The one thing he's going to want to look at in terms of his new team is like, okay, I'm looking to get paid, but how can I continue to get paid so I can get my second big contract? If I look at Evero's track record and see that he doesn't really put pass rushers in positions to succeed and have statistical success and football success at a glamorous position, I don't think as a player or if I'm his agent, I'm going to look at Evero and say that's the best scheme for you to play in, right? Because you're not going to get any kind of shine there because Evero, proving, in last year's draft, he prefers a edge-setting defensive end, right? And so if I'm a guy, just as a fan, I'm hopeful that we can get a guy who can get 10-plus sacks to replace what we lost with Brian Burns or something like that. But the chances that we would get a guy, if we stick to the defense that we know Evero runs, I don't think a top-level edge would choose us or would prioritize us unless we just throw him a humongous bag, something that we weren't even willing to give Brian Burns. And I think it's because we don't value the sack, the pass rush pressure in Evero's defense. And that's, even Brian Burns played with one arm or whatever you want to give him an excuse for. He only had 6 or 7 sacks last year. Whatever it was, he didn't generate what we thought he should generate. And I don't know if anybody has ever had 10-plus sacks in Evero's scheme. The only time you can go back and look to anybody who has had 10-plus sacks in the scheme that he was part of was probably Aaron Donald when he was part of the Rams staff as a secondaries coach. And so that's all I'm going to say about Evero. I think he can be a solid defensive coordinator. I think he has shown that back in 2022. Last year was a little overhyped because of the way we were played. This year was historically bad. If you look at his trend, he's trending in a negative way. This is a what have you done lately league. And I don't know if I'm the Carolina Panthers, I'm going to say this, I'm not going to say anything else about Everett. Everybody thinks, and I've seen it commented on by, notable reporters and everything, that they think this is a sign that Dave Tepper is stepping back. And this is a Dave Canales move. I'm being contrarian to that. I believe Dave Tepper wanted Evero to stay last year, and he made sure that he stayed because he was looking for the compensation benefit of keeping him and maybe him getting the head coach position and us getting draft capital as a result.
Well, I think that's clear. I think that
I think even now, I think it was encouraged to practice patience with Evero. because I do think they like him inherently. I think the ownership likes him. That's why he was paired. And I do believe they want to continue to see if he can rehab the defense, if there's any opportunity for him to rehabilitate his own reputation before he leaves Carolina, instead of just letting him walk.
And real quick,
so
real
Kevin,
quick.
hold on. Kevin jumped in. Kevin, I hope I did not miss you. Have you been sitting in here for a bit, or you just jumped on?
No, I just jumped on my trucking company. I almost ran out of fuel, and they act like they couldn't work with me, so that's who I had to deal with. But I'm good now. I'm actually about to
This is
park
the
in about
working
10
man,
minutes.
Kevin Avery, everyone, from the four-man rush. Kevin, we'll get you in here on this quickly, and then Bryson will go to you.
Okay.
Since he jumped on late. Ejiro Evero, did you want him retained? What are you at? Where are you at with him and him coming back?
Honestly, because we talked about this in the four-man rush chat often, I was always neutral. Like, if we kept him, cool. If we let him go, cool. Reason being, I mean, even when you add all the context of what happened, missing starters, Dan Morgan saying that he hasn't given Evero all the pieces. But at the end of the day, this is your unit, and back-to-back years, we had either been dead last or next to last defensively. Now, me personally, I'm a fan of his 3-4 defensive philosophy. I think it fits. I think a lot of people have forgot that two holdovers from Frank Wright were Dom Capers, who's still with the team, and he was the mastermind of the 3-4 of the Steelers before we hired him as our coach. But I think that if we get the right players, that the different schemes out of the 3-4 philosophy will work. I think that now that he's going to be retained, I'm just going to see how committed Dan Morgan is, being a linebacker, defensive player himself, how he's going to commit resources to turning this around. Because, it's got to be, making him have sleepless nights knowing that the defensive unit that he overseas has been looking like this on back-to-back years, but especially with his first year at GM. So I just think that I saw what Evero's defense did in Denver when they had all the pieces. So I'm excited about what it could be here. I'm just thinking we're just probably about 3 or 4 pieces away, along with the healthy starters returning. But I'm excited to see what this new opportunity that Evero will get this upcoming offseason.
All right, Bryson, you can go, but I just want to mention this. Edgar talked about it. Panthers parted ways with the outside linebacker coach, safeties coach, defensive assistant. I thought it was nuts, and I think Mike K pointed – I think the Bobby guy was around in rules staff. Like, why the hell is this guy still here? I thought that was kind of wild. He has survived 2 staffs, and then they finally gotten rid of him. So, but Bryson, whatever you were going to say, and then also, do you think this is going to help at all, getting rid of these guys? Because Edgar talked about it already, but I want to get you and Ricky's opinion on that.
Yeah, what I was going to say, I was going to provide 3 purely schematic things on the defense that aggravated me week in and week out from the scheme from Ejiro Evero as a defensive coordinator. First one being, you're not getting pressure with 4 and continuing to only rush 4 down in and down out, hoping that it gets home. The second one being, it's 3rd and 1 and you're playing 6 yards off the ball. The wide receivers, the corners are playing 6 yards off, and it's a quick in and out, and it's a first down. And then the last one being, it fucking slipped my mind, but I cannot remember what it was. Damn, but you made me wait so long, I forgot it. But
I'm just kidding.
This whiskey's getting to me, but yeah, I think the last one was being J.C. Horn not shadowing the other team's best wide receiver. Like, CeeDee Lamb was killing us all game, and you put who was it that they had on him, Curtis? You were the one mentioning it when we covered the Cowboys.
Bitching.
Like
it was a safety. It was a safety on him.
Was it Jordan Fuller? Like, you're not allowing J.C. Horn, who mentioned in an interview post-game, like, I would like to shadow the other team's wide receiver, but I'm playing within the scheme. Like, 3 areas that you're playing within this Evero scheme that is just not working, and he's making no adjustments. If he was a coordinator that was like, okay, maybe this isn't working, let's try something different, I think that's a different story, and we might have different opinions about it. But he's been so stubborn with what he's doing and not making changes. So those are the 3 areas that I wanted to talk on. I'm glad I remembered the last one. And then to answer your question, Curtis, will this make a difference? I don't know, man. Like, I don't know what this is going to do differently. Like Edgar mentioned, like, if the issue was personnel, then it's a scouting issue or it's a front office issue, not a outside linebackers coach issue or a safeties coach issue. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. So having a guy around from the rule era, I'm not mad getting rid of that. Like, what the fuck is he doing here? I agree with you, Curtis, but like, I believe one of these guys was interviewed for defensive coordinator positions, is what Mike Kay was saying. I believe it was a safeties coach, was interviewed for defensive coordinator positions last year. So, I mean, that goes hand in hand with, like, Evero's high respect across the league. Like, is firing these guys and bringing in someone else new going to do anything different? I don't really believe so, but, it's changes. Maybe it's just something to make the fans happy. We're keeping Evero, but we're making changes, and this is going to be the difference.
I think it's obvious, like, he's on the hot seat, and this is always the typical move. Like, the coordinator tries to make changes on the coaching staff, and then if that doesn't work, he's gone. But Ricky, thoughts? Do you think this is going to change much at all with these guys gone?
No, I don't think so. Tem Lukabu, he's a pretty widely well perceived guy. I believe that he coached in one of the, I can't remember if it was like a Shrine Bowl or something like that he coached on the staff for one of these postseason tournament games. I thought that he was a pretty, like, well thought of guy. Is it going to make much of a difference? No. I mean, Ejiro Evero is still a defensive coordinator. It's a matter of what adjustments is he going to make. I mean, honestly, that's as like deep as I even want to get into it with Evero's defense, because he's stayed very true to what he does. And I'm going to take that to be what his plan is going forward, and that he is trying to fill in those pieces with exactly what he wants. And if it was because we asked him to get all his, good stuff from the big lots this past offseason, and now we're giving him, target money and telling him, all right, go pick out a couple nice pieces over here at the real department store, right? If that's what we're saying, I don't know that that's the solution, man. That just a more expensive piece is what's missing. I think that there is still the philosophical buy-in to the defense, and what is that defensive identity on that side of the ball. I think that they've got to still find that. Maybe if Shaq comes back and he's healthy, with Josie Jewell, Derek Brown back in there, and maybe they bring in somebody at the 3rd level, at safety, maybe it's easier to rehaul that and build that identity. But it's going to take a little bit more than a couple positional coaches being fired to change what this defense brings to the table.
That's fair. JJ, I don't think you've chimed in on this at all. Thoughts on these coaches?
For me, just to keep it succinct, it's a non-mover for me. I think it's like, Bryce may have mentioned, or maybe it was Ricky. I think it was just something to show the fans that we are taking action, but not really doing anything significant. I'll tell you what would have moved me is if they would have fired Todd Wash, the defensive line coach, or his buddy Cooley, the defensive backs coach, right? Because those would have signaled major shifts in philosophy to how we coach defense. I know you can look at Lukabu and say that, well, he did it with the linebackers, but I think, we were getting washed in the front 7. And I think it was more as a result of what we did on the defensive front than it was linebacker play. And so, and then our safeties were bad in communication. I think that falls on Cooley, right? So if you had made a move that would have been a more notable assistant coach, that would have signaled to me that you were making serious moves to go into next season with your defensive line coach intact, with your defensive backs coach intact. And maybe you did that, coolly for J.C. Horn or somebody, and trying to, to keep his guy around or something. But the defensive line with Todd Wash, one of those. I mean, I'm not saying that I want those guys fired. I'm just saying that those were the more serious movements on the defense.
But jump in on Wash. I am a little confused why they haven't, because I don't know if he's got like ties to Evero. Like he was in Tampa Bay for a while, Seattle, Jacksonville, Detroit. Like those timelines don't match up with Evero's.
No, I mean, what people don't realize is that last year, Evero, came in, with as a head coach interview. But a lot of times with these young head coach candidates, they don't have a whole staff already identified. And so last year when they were putting together the all-star staff, this staff was piecemealed together. Some guys just choosing to come and coach with Frank Wright based on his credibility, not necessarily Evero's credibility. A case in point, you had somebody like, what's my defensive, my cornerbacks coach, former player?
D'Angelo
Hall. I think a lot of those guys came because of who Frank Wright was, not because they wanted to coach with Ejiro Evero. And so now, we still have some of the holdovers from the people who came for Wright, and and you still have a holdover in Bobby Lafayette, whatever his name is, from the Rule era. And so people like Charlotte, man. They get there and they like it, and if Tepper likes them, it feels like he'll keep them around for a little while. And so I think with Evero, what I would like to see is what I would have liked to have seen. If he's not going to be fired, I want to see like a big staff makeover. And we didn't get that. I think we just got something to satisfy fans' thirst for, changing something with the defensive side of football. So they gave us these guys. They're non-movers to me. I'm more interested now, since we're going to keep Evero. I want to see if he shifts his alignment philosophy, or like I said, it's not that I don't like the 3-4. I just want to know or see. Maybe I gotta wait to training camp to see if we do anything differently that's notable, that's visible, and it shows up in play.
All right, I think we're gonna take a break here. We got 30-second break. We'll come back. We're teetering around the 1,000 mark of viewership right now, so stick around. We'll be back in 30 seconds. We got a lot more to talk about. We'll talk Bryce Young, Canales, Morgan, the Panthers pending free agents, and we'll touch right at the end about the draft as well. So stick around. We'll be back here in 30 seconds. Exciting news, Panther fans. I'm thrilled to announce our partnership with BetStamp and Sign Up Expert, opening up an incredible opportunity for you to join sportsbooks in your area to get the best odds and new user offers. Head over to our dedicated page at signupexpert.com/Panthers to explore a selection of sportsbooks tailored to your region, each with unique offerings. If you're ready to take sports betting to the next level and show some love to Panthers on Tap, I highly recommend signing up for your next sportsbook through our Sign Up Expert link.
All right. Before we move on, Curtis, one thing
ahead.
I wanted to say, one guy that should be worshiping the ground that Ejiro Evero walks on, because he's taken a lot of the heat from his unit, is Tracy Smith, the special teams coordinator, because that unit was terrible all year. No matter what way you cut it or look at it, nobody's talking about Tracy Smith losing his job or them hiring a new special teams coordinator. Everything's pointed towards Evero, which, his unit was historically the worst ever, but the special teams unit wasn't good either. And, nobody's talking about him. So Tracy Smith and Ejiro Evero should be going to get a beer together every night. Tracy Smith should be buying him dinner at least once a week. Nobody's talking about him. And I think if Evero's unit played decently, we would be okay. Let's look elsewhere for this coordinator, because this one isn't working either. So I just wanted to mention that, because he's not getting any recognition for how bad his unit was either.
No, I appreciate you bringing that up, because we've talked about that, I feel like, over the past couple of weeks, and that deserves to be mentioned, because I totally agree with you that across the board, Johnny Hecker included, whether you agree with me or not, I don't think has been that great this year. But let's talk about Bryce Young. So we mentioned him off the top. And there's a certain individual in this chat who has gotten a lot of heat for his Bryce Young takes this year. So I got to ask you, JJ, you still trading Bryce Young for a 3rd-round pick, and you want Daniel Jones?
No, after Sunday's game, I upped my request to like early 1st-round pick, maybe a 1st-round if I could garner that. Nah, man, obviously, let me clear the air, because these idiots, I don't care if you're listening or not, Twitter folks who have said these things. Daniel Jones, and I'm not going to make this about Daniel Jones, but Daniel Jones is from Charlotte. And at the time he was released, let's not pretend that Mr. Bryce Young was in the best light in Carolina. And so to not make a logical tie to Daniel Jones as being a person who could come in and compete in that quarterback room at that point in time, was not outlandish. I didn't want Daniel Jones, and nor did I say that I thought that we should pick him up. But the things that were being said by NFL pundits were that there were some ties to the Panthers based on when he was released by the Giants. So I want to clear that up. But no, I mean, as it relates to Bryce Young and Ricky specifically, we actually had spaces early in the season, during the time he was benched. I believe wholeheartedly that Bryce Young should have been benched. And I believe wholeheartedly now that it was the best thing that could have happened for his career. A lot of people listening, a lot of people that talk about Bryce Young on Twitter believe that he was being treated unfairly by being benched. I think Bryce Young was on the verge of being broken completely if he had been asked to stay in that offense, in the mental space he was in, because it was evident. We talked about early in the show, we talked about his body language and how that, translates to his play on the field, him being excitement, him, making plays and, being confident. None of that existed in weeks 1 and 2. And none of it existed at the end of last year, even after the great Green Bay game. We went 8 consecutive scoreless quarters to end last season. And we started this year with an interception. And so when you go and have that type of performance, it leads to doubt, self-doubt. We saw bad body language. We saw sulking shoulders. Bryce was running around, running into his own offensive lineman and falling to the ground when he was trying to scramble in the first 2 weeks. So Bryce needed to be benched. He was benched. The thing I give Bryce Young credit for is going to a great mental space, calming himself down, taking to coaching, sitting back and observing what the offense looked like, from the sideline while Andy Dalton operated it, and believing that once I get back into that position, I'm going to make these plays that were there for me to make in weeks 1 and 2. I'm going to have the confidence to make them now because I see what the actual play should look like. I see where I should go with the football. I think the biggest stride that Bryce Young made as a player, as a quarterback, was his belief that he could actually trust his offensive line. We talked about what Dan Morgan did to bolster that offensive line unit. He went and spent all the money he spent on Robert Hunt and Lewis, to create that curtain, that protection for him. And if you look at Bryson weeks 1 and 2, his footwork in the pocket was still erratic. And he had opportunities to step up in the pocket, but he was stepping back. And when I see him play after he came back, I think he sat and watched the way that the offensive line unit blocked for Andy Dalton on film. And then he went into the game in Denver, and then in every other game after that. And if you see him in the pocket now, he trusts the pocket a lot more than he ever did before. And he had reason to not trust it based on the 62 sacks last year and the way, I would say, the way that he didn't trust it early in the season. But the protection was there in weeks 1 and 2. We saw measures that showed that they were protecting him. He just didn't trust it. Since he's been back, he's been trusting the offensive line. I think his footwork, although it's not perfect, I think his footwork looks a lot cleaner. There's a lot more instances where he actually plants his back foot in the ground and rips a throw, whether it's a 5-yard slant or a deep throw, down the sideline. I think when Bryce trusts the offensive line, when his footwork is in alignment with this throwing, I think we see a better guy. And then, the other thing that Bryce did or has been doing over the past several weeks that I've watched him, that I think has opened up his game, is that he trusts himself to run more. Like Bryce is really decisive when he sees a run lane. Like I don't know if it's the first or second read, but mentally you can see it processing. Like, okay, feeling isn't open. Let me go to my second read. If that second read isn't open, but there's a running lane that he can take off and get 5, 10, 15 yards, he is taking off. And there were times where he looked like he was unsure about doing that. He's always had the ability to do it, but now he's doing it with intentionality. He's actually getting extra yards, when they're there. It's opened up this guy to become a guy that honestly I didn't trust that he could become. I told Ricky this offline whenever we had spaces. I said my biggest issue with Bryce isn't that he can't play the quarterback position, because we've seen flashes of him being able to do that last year and all that. I said I don't trust that he has the fundamentals and the pocket awareness and all that stuff that he can do it on a repeated basis enough for me to say that I would trust it. And so the reason that I maintain my skepticism, even after he returned, is because I was true to that. Like what I had saw in weeks 1 and 2 was so bad to where I wasn't going to let one game make me think like, oh, this guy's top 10 all of a sudden, right? So it was going to take repeated success for me to get to a point where I was like, okay, this guy can actually play the position. And I will say this, 2 weeks ago, I said if Bryce can finish the season with 2 clean games in terms of operating offense, not turning the ball over, then I will reset myself to neutral. And everybody's like, all you can get is neutral. Well, I didn't expect 5 touchdowns in Atlanta. I didn't expect that. But I was committed to what I said. If he played clean football, operated our offense successfully, which he has done, then I will reset myself to a place to where I'm not thinking that we need to address that position going into the offseason. But, I give only thing I can do for Bryce Young in this situation is just give him props for whatever he did psychologically, whatever he did physically, and to take to the coaching, to watch the film, to be prepared, to have confidence, to shake whatever he had to shake off to become the guy that we've seen on Sunday. And I hope, and I say this in front of everybody, whoever's watching, I hope that Bryce Young can start 2025, the offseason, training camp, hopefully the preseason that I begged for this past year, and into the regular season of 2025. I hope that Bryce can start 2025 the way he ended 2024. I think as fans, if we look at Bryce's starts to the past 2 seasons, they have left a lot to be desired. He had a 2 interception game in Atlanta to start last season. He started this year in New Orleans with an interception on his first pass, and that became a disaster. What I would love for Bryce to do, and the coaching staff, is to put him in position to where he can start quickly. We don't have to start 3-0 or 2-0. We don't even have to start with a win. I just want him to start clean, because I think if Bryce can carry over all this great momentum that we have now behind him, nationally, fans, everything, I do think it's a little bit overblown, to be honest. I feel kind of nervous about how excited everyone is. But I do like where we are.
JJ, not to cut you off, but
Yeah.
just real quick, do you have faith in Bryce Young as the quarterback of the Carolina Panthers?
I do. I have faith in him. I'm just just so I'm clear, because I would never want to be a hypocrite, I have faith that he can start. I have faith that he has earned the right to start for the Carolina Panthers, based on the way he's played over the last 3 games. I think the franchise quarterback moniker is a very big and heavy thing to have earned with less than a full season of good play. His play has been outstanding recently, but I still don't think there's enough evidence to say he is the franchise quarterback of the Carolina Panthers without a doubt. I think we want that badly because of what was invested in him. I don't know if he has done quite enough yet without running a full season as consistently as he did over the past, 7-8 games. I would need to see a full slate of that. And if he don't have to have 5 touchdowns every week or 4 touchdowns every week or anything like that. But if he plays a full slate of games as an efficient quarterback, showing what we saw, just some consistency in a full season of that, then I'll be ready to say he's our franchise guy. Yes, Bryce Young is a starting quarterback in the league. Yes, he has played very well recently. Me personally, I can't go from where I was to that's my franchise guy quite yet. I would want to see how we play in 2025 before I stamp him and say that's my guy. And I'm looking at extending him and giving him a future contract for the Carolina Panthers. I don't think anybody in Carolina right now would give Bryce Young an extension to say he's our stamp guy forever.
I have follow-up, so I want to give other people time here. Edgar, we'll go to you, and we're going to go to Kevin's question because we've talked about this on the show before, and everyone kind of knows where we sit with this. But I want to get your take, and then you can kind of answer what your thoughts were on Bryce this year. Do you guys really believe – this is Kevin's question. I'll bring it up. Do you guys really believe the plan was always to go back to Bryce, like Dan said? So if you want to answer that, Edgar, and then also just kind of dive into what you thought of Bryce's maturation over this last year.
Sure. I know you'll probably say this is a cop-out answer, but I don't really care. Like, who cares? Like, it's already over. Bryce Young's a quarterback. I don't want to relive history. Like, oh, was there a plan? Was he going to well, there's no auto accident. It happened. We can't do anything. So I really hate talking about it on Twitter or people asking because it doesn't. We talk for hours about things that could have happened. It didn't happen. We didn't need a plan. He's a quarterback. We're good. I just want to echo what JJ said. He really started to trust himself. I think that was the most important part. Offensive line, great, but the things that I saw in Atlanta that was the biggest I saw and it's man, he's really grown. Was there were people that were free rushing him that he was dead to rights, and he just does a little a shift with his footwork, or I feel like last year he'd get sacked or he'd run a certain way right into a sack and he'd fumble, yeah. But the throw to Xavier Leggett, he was dead to rights and he got it to him. There was that scramble touchdown. There was 3 guys in the backfield, and then as he ran, there was 1 guy, and he still was able to just get through and get the touchdown. And so for me, that growth that he knows that he's good in this league, that's everything. And then I also want to answer one more thing that's also a rebuttal to you, Curtis. Dave Canales deserves the credit of benching him and bringing him back. And I know not to relive the Evero thing, but Dave Canales, the reason why I like him as a coach, and then last year or the last 2 years when we talked about who should be the head coach for the Panthers, I love guys who take the worst or who nobody wants and elevates them, right? Was Geno Smith a starting quarterback in the league? Would he have started for anybody? No, but Dave Canales turned him into something. Baker Mayfield, Bryce Young. And so when we talk about the guys on the defense, would they start for anybody in the league? No, they probably wouldn't. But I want a coach who can elevate. If I can just get a coach who needs all-stars at every position, then why don't I just hire anybody? I want Evero to succeed when things are not going well, because look at the Lions, look at what's going on over there. There are situations in every year on every team where injuries are not the greatest. And then I'll go back to week 1. Week 1, the defense was all fine and dandy. They were all healthy. And how did they perform? And so I know I'm answering a question of Evero to go to Bryce Young, but with Bryce Young, I just want to say that he was really, I think he himself had to go over personal growth. He is not the quarterback like an Anthony Richardson or a Cam Newton or even a Josh Allen where I can get by in this league just on my physical attributes. The way he succeeds in this league has to be done through like experience, through like the grind, through the fire. Like he has to do it cerebrally. And so I think one thing that I got wrong is that he needed time to figure out how to win in this league. But the other players, like an Anthony Richardson, like I could just run over people. I could just scramble out. I could just launch a 60-yard pass if I see something. Bryce Young cannot do that. And so for him to win, he needed to like just settle down and know that like I'm damn good at what I do. I'm gonna agree with JJ, even though one of the biggest Bryce Young fans. I can't anoint him just yet. He hasn't put together one full season of success yet. And so how can I say a franchise quarterback, someone's a franchise quarterback when they haven't put together a full season yet? And so put together the full season. You know, CJ Stroud put together a full season, got his team to the playoffs. Like someone
And
wants
had
to
a
argue he's
sophomore
franchise
slump. Let's not forget the sophomore slump.
had a sophomore slump, right? And so like I don't want Bryce Young to have a sophomore slump, but if he struggles next year, then like we said, like, oh, we anointed him too quickly. So give him the time. He's one thing that's gonna make Bryce Young even better next year that he hadn't had ever in his NFL career. He now has 2 years of the same system, right? He had three
Huge.
play calls in year one and then switched to Canales year two. He gets this full off season, just he doesn't have to memorize anything. He already knows everything. And so I expect him to take another leap ahead next year just because he has the exact same play calling, exact same verbiage, everything going into next year.
Well, and Edgar, I appreciate you answering my question 30 minutes later. I appreciate that. But I think it also goes to the point, and I know JJ's a big traits guy when it comes to his quarterbacks. He wants these physical specimens just based off of what we've talked about in the past. But I think it also proves that you don't always need that. And Anthony Richardson is wholeheartedly the point of that. Look at what he has done. Nothing in this league. Everyone thought he was going to be the quote-unquote next Cam Newton, and he has been dog shit up to this point. I do think coaching matters too, though, in the situation. But we were all, I mean, everyone was riding the coattails like this guy was going to be the next greatest thing. Panthers were making the biggest mistake picking this small QB. And Anthony Richardson hasn't done jack shit in this league. So I do think that needs to be brought up because a lot of people wanted to poke and prod at the Panthers for not taking a guy that was going to fit the Cam Newton mold of that draft class. And then I do think it's worth even talking about the CJ Stroud of, you know, this guy had such a good year last year and everyone thought he was going to take the next step. And he took a step back, whether you want to admit it or not. Injuries on offense. They lost guys at the wide receiver position. They didn't have a great deep offensive line. And we saw CJ Stroud come back down to earth and struggle with him with the pressure. And over the last 10 weeks, we haven't talked about enough because honestly, us three who have been running this show, we haven't wanted to talk to guys or talk about guys outside this team, but I think it deserves to be talked about now since we're over with, or the season's over with. Bryce Young outplayed CJ Stroud since the benching. So that needs to be put out there into the world because everyone wanted to berate Bryce Young last year and say he wasn't the number one pick. No one thought he should have been the number one pick. Panthers made a mistake, and they went out, and Bryce Young is proving right now that the Panthers made the right choice based off of these last 7, 8, 9 games. Now, does he have to do it consistently? Absolutely. I get that. But he is proving what he did at Alabama, that he is a point guard, and he is a magician when he is confident and has confidence in his offense, and you are starting to see that now. And Edgar, you nailed it. Him in a second year with the same OC, that's huge. That is massive for him, and I think that's where you're going to see the development only skyrocket from here. Kevin, I want to get your take on Bryce Young this season and your thoughts of what he did. You know, I mean, it's been a roller coaster ride from the benching to, you know, him coming out after the car accident. And where do you stand with him as the starter in Carolina?
When I reflect on the year Bryce Young had, it reminds me of, you know, the struggle day to day that we all endure. You know, it's not how you start, it's how you finish. You know, a lot of times, you know, those who were never high on him when the lows were low, they want to cement it as this is how it's always going to be. And I love the fact that so much crow is being served, sauteed grilled right now for Bryce Young. And I get, like you said, only got a half a season sample. Um, so, I do agree, not quite time to say he is the franchise guy, but he certainly has earned a seat at the table to be first in line to make that claim. Um, while I was listening to you guys, I actually came across some information, and I just posted on the Four Man Rush Facebook page. The last 4 weeks of the season, Bryce Young was number one in touchdown to turnover ratio. 10 touchdowns, 0 turnovers. That was first in the NFL. And, um, it's just like, I titled it Strong Face, Strong Finish. And I think that it took not only Bryce Young having faith in himself, Coach Canales having faith in Bryce Young, Brad Izzett, the OC, his teammates having faith in him. Like Robert Hunt said in the closeout interview, he be dicing it up in practice, you know. So I just really like the fact that 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 this rough patch Bryce Young went through. He took lemons and started making lemonade. And we from the South, and we know we love that country town lemonade. You know what I'm saying? So I just really like the fact that Bryce Young pretty much gave us a sneak preview. I feel like he gave us a sneak preview of the next upcoming attractions for the Carolina Panthers. Um, Another thing, you guys were talking about quarterbacks, metrics and size and certain attributes. Was y'all aware that Bryce Young at 5'10" had the fewest batted passes of all quarterbacks in the NFL? Only had one batted down all year.
Oh, remember that was the
And
narrative, man, going in the draft. Come on, can't throw over
That's
the middle.
right,
crazy.
right. And I can remember on this show, it was thought of that was going to be an issue for him, and so many people thought he couldn't play up under center, and it's just refreshing that you know if you give players that you don't like the same grace that you give players that you do like, let them go through the fire, let them get molded, let them get tested, let them go through the gauntlet of being challenged and finding out what they're really made of. You'll see what type of player that you got, and I just like the fact that Bryce Young went through the depths of football hell, written off. Like I say, people talking about trading him, and so all kind of nonsense. And now it's like, you know, let me reintroduce myself. You know, so for me, I'm excited. It's still a lot of work to be done. It's still, the fact that it was a great point brought up. He's about to have, for the first time since high school, the same offensive coordinator, same, system in back-to-back years. I mean, that chemistry and everything um, is just going to be huge and important. So I just like the fact that he didn't let how he start affect the way that he finished, and he finished like someone that's going to look like a top 10 quarterback entering 2025. And I like the fact that others around the league, um, peers, have been taking note and paying attention as well. I don't know if you guys heard the Michael Parsons podcast where he was giving a lot of price. He said it point blank, Carolina gonna be that team that you don't want to play. They're gonna be the team that's gonna be on the up and rise. And I like the fact that we play Dallas again next year. That someone, the star from the team, who has admitted he's a big Bryce Young fan himself, was giving him his flowers. So I'm excited.
Yeah, and I just lost my damn train. Oh no, you said something, Kevin, about faith, and I hate to go negative here and talk about this, but I want to get Ricky's take on this because I feel like we're both on the same wavelength on this. I don't know if Canales had faith in Bryce Young after the benching, and it goes to the point of it literally, and I hate going back to this, and I know Edgar is not going to like this either, probably, but it took a car accident for this guy to come back into the game. that car accident doesn't happen, I don't know if we're talking about Bryce Young right now. So my question to you, Ricky, is did Canales really have faith in Bryce Young? I mean, he does now, obviously, but did he have faith in the season?
I mean, I think I've probably given an answer, whether it's a direct answer or an around the way answer to this question all season, to be honest. I don't think that there was any trust or any big plan that they wanted to go back to that. I think if everything went the way that they had planned, Bryce probably sat the entire rest of that season, watched Andy Dalton play football, and then the decision makers got to decide in the offseason if they wanted to give him a shot here in Carolina or if they were moving off of him right away. I think that that's the feel that I always got from it. But with how he's played, he has played himself out of that specific predicament, I think. I don't think that he's played himself out of every predicament that he can still face here in Carolina, but I think he got himself out of that one. And JJ said something that, him and I have spoke about, but he said something that I always agreed with. And even as a very big supporter of Bryce Young, I always wondered how often was he going to be able to replicate enough of what he does at a consistent basis to win consistently in the NFL, right? Because a lot of times when you look at a guy like Bryce Young, his special is what gives him that advantage, right? It's his innate ability to make plays. It's not all of the physical tools. It's his timing to make those big plays when it looks like he has no business being able to make them. The subtle movement and manipulation within the pocket that can extend plays and then allows him to use his more than adequate arm strength and whip that he can generate from his off-platform angles and the different trajectories that he can throw on. Like if you watch Bryce Young at Alabama, that was something also that everyone loved, and you're seeing it in the NFL. He can get throws off in a muddy pocket. Just because he's 5'10", he releases the ball at a pretty high angle. He gets some of these balls off at a really nice looking trajectory for a small quarterback, right? But he has to do everything kind of remarkably at times to be able to get some of this stuff off. So you're like, how often can he repeat that? And can he repeat it enough? What I'm loving, and at least this is my take, I'm seeing that he definitely can. And it's not that he's only repeating it in these like big splash plays either, though. That's kind of just how he plays quarterback, is with a little touch of remarkable. Like it's the way that he operates even within structure. And there is a little bit of this Pat Mahomes style of like element to that, right? Because even the regular he does looks a little bit different. And it's because he's unconventional and he does things differently. A lot of it may be his size, but a lot of it is his play style, man, and his confidence. If the dude has his confidence and is really bringing that every single day, I buy that he can be special and that his special can be enough to do it at a consistent level and take him to another level. Where I got nervous with Bryce Young is that mental part seemed like it was going away for him. And if he doesn't have all of that clicking at a very high level and together, then I don't think that the physical stuff is there to get him past that. It's got to all click. If it is, though, I think that he's absolutely terrific, man. And I think that we've got this ridiculous quarterback of the future if he can keep that special at a consistent level.
I think for Bryce Young, post benching in Carolina, I don't think there was a quarterback in the NFL that was better in the pocket avoiding a rush. I saw it week in and week out, a complete 180 from year one to year two. JJ mentioned, running into his own offensive lineman in year one. In year two, making some of the best defensive linemen in the NFL just miss. He hit a spin on Micah Parsons that, unfortunately didn't result in anything, but hit a spin that was crazy. We saw in the last game in Atlanta, just absolutely, I think Zavala whiffed on a block, and it was pretty much a free rusher, and he just steps to the side and throws that ball to, I believe it was the one he threw to Xavier Leggett. I mean, his movement in the pocket he's like almost impossible to tackle now. Like, he is just so quick, makes quick decisions. It's been spectacular to see. And real quick, Ricky, I'm going to read some stats. You may be familiar with them from earlier in the podcast, but I'm going to give you some numbers, and I want you to tell me how many better quarterbacks there are than Bryce Young at this stat. Okay? Are you ready?
Yeah.
All right. Tied for first in big time throw percentage. How many better quarterbacks does that mean there are in the NFL?
Tied for none.
None. You're right. Second in big time throws.
That's only one. Only one better.
Yeah. Tied for third in average depth per target.
Tied for only two better.
Yeah. Fourth in deep passing grade.
Tough one because we're getting up there with big numbers now, but only 3 are before 4.
All right. Buckle in because fifth in overall passing grade.
4.
4. Yeah. That was for the last 10 weeks of the season.
Hmm.
He played out of his fucking mind for the last 10 weeks of the season. And this was through he went through the gates of hell to start his career. Sacked second most in NFL history in his first season in the NFL. And he gets benched 2 weeks into his second season and watches Andy Dalton play decent. I don't know, struggled as well. Andy Dalton gets involved in an act of God, and then Bryce Young is thrusted back on the field, and my God, he's playing good. You know, I think a lot of credit goes to Bryce Young and his mental capacity, his mental stability. You know, I don't know if I was in that situation, I don't know what I would have done because I can tell you right now, my mental stability is not the same level as Bryce Young's. To have a whole entire fan base almost. I mean, I know us three on this podcast, we're still supporting Bryce Young, but I would say maybe like 80% of the fan base was like, this he's a bust. He's not good. You had national media, Stephen A. Smith, that guy Craig, whatever the fuck his name is, talking about how he's a bust. You know, Stephen A. Smith was throwing out Jamarcus Russell stats.
Someone tag Craig right now. He needs to be tuning into this shit.
Send him an invite. Get him on this podcast right now because I need to talk to that man. But, you know, like everyone, it felt like to me at least, everyone on X in the national media was basically just saying Bryce Young was done. And you know, he's a backup quarterback in this league. And then he comes out and you know, you heard me and Ricky go back and forth for the last 10 weeks of the season. He was top 5 in almost every stat. So I'm comfortable saying, I know a couple other people aren't. He's a franchise quarterback. He's doing this without a top 30 receiver in the NFL right now. If you think Adam Thielen at 35 years old, 34 years old he's a good receiver. Now, don't get me wrong. He catches what's thrown his way, but he gets no separation whatsoever. And if he gets a legitimate weapon, T. Higgins, Garrett Wilson, we're going to talk about it later, but, maybe a Ted McMillan drafted in the top 10, like Bryce Young gets legitimate weapons. Oh my God, you're going to see a different level of Bryce Young in a second year with an offensive coordinator for the first time in his career. Like things are the arrow is pointing up, 100% pointing up for Bryce Young, and I am comfortable saying he's our franchise moving forward.
All right, I want to go to this to kind of move this along a little bit, but I'm pulling these stats up. So we had these guys on before the season, and I honestly haven't looked at these. We looked at them probably about a month ago. But here's our stats we had before the season started. Make sure I can get this right. Here we go. So, Bryson, let me make sure you're not covered up. All right. So this was before the year. So a lot of us had Bryce Young or Deontay Johnson, Offensive Player of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year, J.C. Horn, which honestly checked out. Guy made the Pro Bowl. Rookie of the Year, Jatavion Sanders, a couple of us, Jonathan Brooks. Jonathan Brooks gets injured. And then look at the Bryce Young stats. Looking at it quickly, it looks like Kevin, JJ actually was the most. had the most projections for Bryce. And then Leggett, which honestly, a lot of us were a couple of us were pretty close with the Leggett statistics. But I just thought maybe I should just pull this full screen because you need a magnifying glass to see it. There we go. But I thought we'd revisit this a little bit because I thought it would be kind of funny just to look. Obviously, Bryce Young's stats are skewed because he was benched, so it's kind of hard to really go off of that. I mean, I guess you could go off of what he was projected if he would have continued at his pace, but he had 2,400 yards, 15 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. And I want to say, I don't know what his rushing touchdowns were, and I don't think we had rushing touchdowns in here. But I think if he would have continued on that trajectory, he honestly probably would have been pretty close to most of our numbers. And then you have Leggett. If I can just pull this up real quick. He obviously battled injuries, but 497 yards, 49 receptions, 4 touchdowns. Pretty close to a lot of us. Me and JJ probably the closest out of everyone here. But we all had a lot of high expectations for Leggett. And that's kind of where I wanted to lead this conversation and get your guys' perspective on Leggett because, he's definitely gotten some flack with the drops this year. You look at some of the receivers that were drafted after him that are playing at a high level. So I guess I'll go to JJ on this and I forgot how I phrased it last week, but do you think Carolina made I guess I'll say, do you think Carolina made the right pick with Leggett? Do you think he can become a solid wide receiver in this league, or do you think these drops are going to continue and he's going to get in his own head and we're just going to follow down this path and, he's the next Jonathan Mingo? You're muted, by the way.
All right. So let me preface it by this. I've never put a lot of faith in rookie wide receivers. That's number one, right? My favorite football player of all time is Jerry Rice. If you go back and look at the history of Jerry Rice, he had a horrible rookie season when it came to dropping the football, right? And he went on to be the greatest wide receiver of all time. I do not think my South Carolina comrade and coon-eating Xavier Leggett is going to be Jerry Rice, but I do believe that his hands will improve because Xavier Leggett didn't have a problem catching the football at South Carolina. Xavier Leggett was somebody who had a great final season at South Carolina, who went to the Senior Bowl and demonstrated the ability to separate and run routes at a more proficient rate than anybody expected that he could for a man his size, right? Xavier Leggett was drafted based on potential. Xavier Leggett was drafted for all the same reasons that everybody was intrigued with Anthony Richardson as a quarterback. It was because if we get it right with Xavier Leggett, he has the potential to be the best in this class, right? But I don't think anybody who drafted Xavier Leggett expected for him to be a refined product in year one, right? Xavier Leggett, and I'm not making excuses for his drops, but I think he is a victim of situation when you look at the Carolina Panthers. Like, he began this season as wide receiver 4 here in Carolina. You had Deontay Johnson, Adam Thielen, and Jonathan Mingo was pegged as 1, 2, and 3. And Leggett was somebody who was going to be able to work in and get snaps, right? By mid-season, due to Thielen's injury, due to the things that was going on with Deontay Johnson, Xavier Leggett was expected to be the X receiver and found himself in some situations where a lot was riding on his readiness to be the X. And to be honest, as a rookie, he just wasn't up to task. And, I personally believe that his drops were due to some issues he had with his wrist, his left wrist being injured. I really distinctly feel when I went back and saw the replay of the drop in Philadelphia, when he was bracing for the ground, I feel like that's when he lost control of the ball because he wanted to protect that wrist and not let that wrist be the first thing that impact the ground. But all that being said, he needs to get better. I do have faith in his ability to develop and become a better wide receiver. I don't know if he would ever be an elite guy, but I think the things that he does well is something that nobody ever expected, and that was for him to be able to get separation, against press coverage, and because those were the things that people questioned. Nobody questioned if he could catch the ball. They questioned if he could be a guy who could run routes and get separation. I think as fans, it's kind of like, and I hate to say this, but I'm a fan of basketball as well as football. It's kind of like one of those things, like, let's say LeBron James. You like LeBron James. If you're a LeBron James fan,
here we go.
No, but let me make the analogy real quick.
No, you're good. You're good.
And this isn't about Bryce Young being LeBron James, but it's about the fact that when LeBron James was playing with the Cavaliers, or even now with the Lakers, if LeBron makes a great play, makes the right pass, hits the guy in the corner for an open three, and the guy blows the three, then everybody's blaming the guy for being a bad shooter, right? I think because Leggett made some of his worst drops when we were all hoping that Bryce would make a game-winning throw or some big play, and Leggett let him down. I think his drop was magnified by 10 times, because of the moment and because it kind of hurt the narrative for Bryce. I just think that we should let Leggett have the opportunity to go into his second year and build on the things he did well in year one, and just let him develop like a rookie. Like I said, this situation is so bad that everything that goes wrong looks 10 times worse.
I agree with that, though, but JJ, I also think it doesn't help when you look back at the history of Carolina and how they've drafted wide receivers, and a lot of fans have the fear of what Jonathan Mingo brought, and then it's compounded by you have guys that what was supposed to be a loaded wide receiver class this past year that are outperforming the wide receiver you traded up in the first round to get, guys like Pearsall late in the season, guys like Ladd McConkey, where they're showing up their rookie year, and you have a guy who didn't have a drop problem, who's consistently game in and game out dropping the ball. And I get it. Like I'm kind of on your end. Like I do think these wide receivers need a little grace, and that's why me and Bryson kind of gave Mingo a little grace this year. Like, let's see what this guy can do in his second year. And I think that Leggett deserves that too. But I think sometimes that the class itself and this paranoia I feel like Panther fans have of, oh my God, this guy's another Jonathan Mingo and we whiffed again. I mean, because that can be that's like a true like Carolina might be looking at going out and getting another wide receiver because they're not sold on what Leggett brings. Like this was supposed to, potentially be like the number one guy for this team, and he's up to this point, I feel like hasn't played up to par of what the expectation was.
Let me say this before we move off of that. Ladd McConkey is the only guy that's clearly better than Leggett at the position he was drafted at. I'm talking about
Keon Coleman.
Keon Coleman isn't that much better than Leggett in terms of what he's doing. He's playing with Josh Allen, and he has a very specific skill set, and that's high pointing the ball. I don't think he's played the position that much better than Leggett, but he has made bigger plays. If you look at his full season, I don't know if he has. Maybe he has more touchdown catches. I don't know. But to compare Xavier Leggett to Jonathan Mingo is so egregious. That man couldn't find the end zone.
And I want to be fair because I don't want this out there. I'm not out on Leggett. I'm playing devil's advocate with you here.
Well, I'm just saying that even for anybody listening in the fan base to compare Leggett to Mingo just because they have similar body measurements is just egregious because he showed that he can get in the end zone. The moment, I saw him catch touchdowns from Dalton. I saw him catch touchdowns from Bryce. He has made big plays. He won against the best cornerback in the league. I didn't see a lot of guys catch touchdowns on pass routine this year. Leggett did, right? But nobody credits the stuff that he does well. And I just think it's unfair to him because there's so many fans who are looking at him objectively, and that's cool, right? You know, Ricky struggled. He has made some bad plays and big moments. But I think some of the hatred towards Leggett or the lack of patience is because I think some of his moments it didn't help Bryce and didn't help the narrative to the fans who are like very fanatical about Bryce.
See, I disagree with you. This is where I think
that's just me.
This
that's
is proving that you. I disagree. I think you're still going in on Bryce.
There are some fans. No, I think there's some guys who, fans who take the narrative about Leggett being bad. There were some guys who never wanted him drafted in the first place, right? And so when he looks bad to them, it's kind of like the way that people argue about Bryce. If you never believed in Bryce and then he played bad, then it's going to be 10 times worse for those people. There were guys who always felt that Leggett shouldn't have been drafted. I was a person who was back and forth between him and Ladd because I liked Ladd. But I felt like because we had Deontay Johnson and we had Adam Thielen on the roster, I think it made a guy like Ladd, be somebody that they could kind of look past. They want to get a bigger X type, and that's why they went and got Leggett. But that being said, I think Ladd is clearly the only guy who outplayed him. I think your guy down at AD Mitchell, showed the skill set to be better than he was if he had a better quarterback.
Yeah, he just never got the opportunity.
But he didn't have a better season than Leggett. When I look at what Leggett's situation, because let's be honest, if Bryce was bad in the first 2 weeks, then the QB play was bad. He came in with Dalton. Dalton played pretty well early on. Leggett was playing pretty decent. I think as Leggett's injury became more bothersome, I think the drops became more consistent. And people don't want to give that context. But
I don't buy that.
He wasn't dropping the ball early in the season. Not with not the same rate.
My problem, though, JJ, is he made a catch this past week, and me and Ricky actually talked about this when it happened. He made a contested catch this past week, and I'm like, there is no way this wrist is bothering him. When that guy's making a play like that, and then you drop a wide open, I think it's up here, man. I really do. I think it's mental.
But he's a rookie. He's a rookie, bro.
JJ, I got a question for you. You talk about wide receivers, Ladd, others that have outperformed him. On his own team, did undrafted wide receiver free agent Jalen Coker outperform Xavier Leggett in year one?
Absolutely. But that has nothing to do with who Xavier Leggett is. Like Xavier Leggett is running his own race, right? The fact that we had the benefit of getting Jalen Coker as an undrafted free agent, like Jalen Coker should have been drafted at least by round 5, right? We were lucky that nobody picked him up, and we were able to pick him up where we picked him up at, because you can go back to before the season started. Like, I was adamant that he should be on the active roster back in June. Jalen Coker is a consistent catcher. He's dependable. He runs good routes. He's a big body. Even though he had the biggest play of the season, probably I think it was the biggest play in Carolina history over the last however many years, not the longest play, but one of the longest plays in history. He still is not Xavier Leggett if Xavier Leggett catches the ball more consistently. So I think it's great that we have Jalen Coker. I think he outperformed Xavier Leggett, but just based on the premise that he was more consistent. And that's more of a credit to him than a detriment to Leggett.
I want to kind of move past, because we got a lot more to talk about. So let's move forward here. And this is still along the lines of the draft. And this kind of, I feel like, hits the head on all of this. And I'll go to Kevin on this. And the overall question is, do you feel good about the direction of the team? But I also want to know what you thought of Dan Morgan's first year as the GM, because this was a guy who a lot of us, including me, gave flack to the hiring because he was part of the previous regime and they didn't really do the full, like, empty out the closet. Let's get rid of all the dirty laundry. Let's bring in some fresh guys here. So what were your thoughts on Dan Morgan's first year as GM, both free agency wise, draft wise? And do you feel good about the direction of this team right now?
As far as Dan Morgan, overall, I was definitely pleased with his year one resume. You go back to free agency, the signing of Robert Hunt and Shields at guard will probably go down as one of the key moments of the
Lewis.
resurgence. I'm sorry, Lewis.
Who the hell's
Forgive me.
Shields?
Yeah. I was thinking about a different guard named Shields. Sorry. But yeah.
No, you're
Forgive me
good.
because
You were busy eating over there. What the hell were you eating, Kevin?
hey, that was a chicken Caesar salad, man. I was up in the snow in Kentucky, man, and I ain't stopped because I wanted to get out that damn snow. I was hungry as hell. So
Sorry, I don't mean to cut in there, but I thought that was funny. Go ahead.
yeah, so but yeah, Lewis and Hunt being signed. I mean, we literally saw our O line go from, bottom 10 to top 10, with that with those signings. I think that even though he had his moments where he gets overwhelmed, but I think the signing of linebacker Josie Jewell was a hit for us as well. Um, I do think he gets caught up in the wash on run plays, but I think having a better D line to occupy blockers will help alleviate some of that pressure. Um, and then when you look at the free agents in the secondary, you know, Mike Jackson. I mean, we got a legit number 2 corner here now, and I just really like that once he got healthy and was able to get on the field. Um, I think he was uh, third in the league. I think he had like 15 pass breakups this season. So yeah, dude was balling. So I just think from a free agency point of view, I think Dan Morgan had various hits. As far as the draft goes, I'm still bothered by trading up for Jonathan Brooks when we could have stayed put. And who was that running back out of Florida State that I had light that was available? I can't think of
Trey
his name off
Benson?
the top.
Trey
Yeah,
Benson.
yeah.
Damn, our
I
guy
was
Cooper was out there. They could have taken Cooper with that second pick.
nah. Green Bay got us one pick before, man.
Well, no, but if they didn't trade out of that spot, they would have gotten him. Is my
Oh
point.
yeah. If they
Third
didn't
and
trade
nine.
out, yeah. Yeah, and my daughter's happy because she's a Green Bay fan, so she loves Cooper because I was the one that
Shame.
showed her film on it. But
Kevin, what's going on? You're raising a Green Bay fan? Come on, man.
Bad parenting, bro.
What is going on, Kevin? I'm calling CPS right now.
but overall, I like the fact the biggest thing that Dan Morgan I think did that it's not getting talked enough about, but I think we'll see with this upcoming off-season draft. The fact that he cleared house of the scouting department. I mean, he got rid of everybody. From front to back, top to bottom, side to side. Like he got his people in the scouting department. I think that because we was what they were saying, we was talking to somebody from Memphis, some wide receiver, at some Hula Bowl or something like that. So I just really think that that's going to be something that when we look back at our acquisitions, both in free agency and in the draft, we're going to look at the fact that Dan Morgan had his guys with his own set of eyes under his tutelage out there. But if I had to give him a grade, I would give him a B plus for Dan Morgan year one. What keeps him from getting an A? I don't like the fact that we didn't address the center position, which is now in flux because allegedly Brady Christensen wants to test free agency. Austin
Oh, now you like
Corbett.
Brady, Kev? Now you like Brady?
He in year four, he showed his versatility. I mean, and he got physical. That's the one thing I like. He was always athletic, but he didn't bring the physical. In
Yeah, you
lineman
didn't like
terms,
his
he
physicality. He was showing it this
yeah,
year.
yeah, lineman, we call it, you got to bring your ass with you when you block, and he wasn't doing that. You know what I'm saying? He was very light in the ass. He would be big and fast, but he would get knocked off easily. And I think once they was able to, get him settled interior, he played some guard, played some definitely some center. He grew into that. So if he wants to explore free agency, hey, I'd be happy for him. If he decides he want to stay, I'd be cool with that. But I definitely think that not addressing the center position, because I was big on Cedric Van Pran, who ended up going to Buffalo to play the center position. I'm here for us. So now we got a hole there. Even though Cade Mays played admirably there, I think we can upgrade the position significantly. Um, and we got to bring some competition in for kicking. Eddie, I like Eddie, but Eddie, like you guys said, when the moment was clutch and we needed him, the misses he had just got magnified.
And
But
we'll
I
talk about
definitely
Eddie
think.
when we talk about free agents too. We'll talk about
Oh,
him.
okay, okay. But yeah, but overall, I give Dan Morgan a B plus year one.
Ricky, we haven't heard from you in a bit. What do you give it? What grade you giving Dan in his first year as GM? I don't know. I kind of disagree with Kev. I feel like a lot of us thought that center position was something they needed to address, and I feel like they did a pretty damn good job this year with Corbett. He goes down. Christensen comes in because Cade Mays wasn't ready. Then like those guys filled in pretty well. But overall, Ricky, what do you think Dan Morgan did in his first year?
Yeah, I think that those guys fill in well at center, but I think that when you have the opportunity to draft a center and you can do third, fourth, fifth round usually for players like that, you could spend a little bit higher and get a guy like a Zach Frazier, right, who has been absolute nails for the Steelers. Day one, the minute that his number is called, he goes in, he plays well. JPJ with the Raiders, I mean, he's played guard and center for him, and he's kind of bolstered that interior. That's what you look at is it worth going ahead and bolstering that depth for years to come and allow that unit to grow together. Because what you get with Cade Mays too, Cade Mays performed adequately for the most part on a week-to-week basis. He had some games where he struggled pretty badly, and then he had a game or two where he had a very nice game that kind of made you say, well, hey, look, man, maybe he's kind of getting his feeding underneath him. But if you had a player that you knew was always going to be there and playing well, like those guys that we just talked about, all of a sudden that three-man crew of Damian Lewis, your center, and Robert Hunt right there, I mean, that's a wall, man. And that's a wall that grows together for, 2 to 5 years, depending on contracts. Ickham, I think Icky played a much better role this year. I think that he benefits as well from – it's interesting how good an offensive line can be if they at least have 2 or 3 legitimate NFL starters on it, and it's not just Taylor Moton and you're asking everyone else around him to play up to a decent level of football. So I think that you're just seeing what you can do with talent at multiple positions along the line. As for what do I think about Dan Morgan, the GM, I think that he has a decent eye for football talent. But I think that if we want to turn this thing around a little bit quicker than I think is realistic, and I do want to do it quicker, man, because I'm sick and tired of losing. Like I'm a very impatient fan. I'll be completely honest, because I think that I've been asked to be patient for a really long time now with like everyone else who's actually in charge of making the decisions to not be patient and to do all these ridiculous, like, souped up on espresso martini type moves. So, in the middle of the night talking to other teams. And I'm just like, I just need everything to make more sense and not have someone come and try to tell me, hey, you just got to trust me. I don't trust you though. Like I just haven't had any trust with this team. I want to trust Dan Morgan more than I wanted to trust Scott Fitterer probably some of that is because he's a former Panther and I have the nostalgia of his playing days. But I also think that he's willing to look at this strictly from a football thing and try to build a football team. I don't know that Scott Fitterer was ever trying to build a football team. I think he was trying to put together a resume of who he signed and who he brought in and names. And if they could get like a feather in his cap for one of those big ones working out, all of a sudden he's a very smart GM. Dan Morgan, I think, can build a football team. He's been on one. He's been on winning football teams. He understands that there's more to a football team than just the names on the paper. So I want to feel really good about him. But for this year alone, we went, 4-13, 5-12 this year, or 5-12 this year? I can't give you a really good grade when your team goes 5-12. That's a really tough thing for me because you still lost almost, one every 3 games you're losing. So I give him a C. And I think that that's a little bit higher than I would have been at the end of this year. But this last game against the Falcons, I'm going to give everyone a little bit of a rosier outlook because that game made me smile, man. It made me a happy fan for a day. So you get the benefit of the doubt of happy Ricky and get the C on this one.
Bryson, what grade you giving Dan Morgan?
Yeah, I'm still laughing at Kevin saying that Brady Christensen was light in the ass. I mean, I lost it. I don't know if you guys
that
saw
whiskey's getting to Bryson.
I mean, no, the whiskey's, dude, I don't have one glass of whiskey. I'm about 4 beers deep right now, but that shit was hilarious to me. So as far as Dan Morgan, we've talked about Jonathan Brooks in the second round. I think we agreed that we liked the pick, but it was unfortunate what happened for Jonathan Brooks in year one, obviously getting injured again. I think he's going to be a good talent for this team moving forward, but unfortunately didn't work out this season for us. So I did not like what they did at the center position, addressing that. There were injury concerns with Austin Corbett. It was a different area of injury that the concern was in, bicep versus a leg injury, but still not addressing that with a first-time center coming in, playing the position, I think was a risk. And we've, Christensen stepped in, played well. Cade May stepped in, played decent. But again, you could have had a guy like Zach Frazier or JPJ that's played admirably well for their teams. So I think Dan Morgan did some good things. I'm wearing his jersey right now, his Carolina Panthers jersey. Had some head scratchers in other areas, like your favorite player, Curtis and Dane Jackson. I would say for Carolina, it was a good offseason because they hit on the offensive line with the Robert Hunt and Damian Lewis, at the guard position. They identified those 2 players. They went out and got them. Some argue they overpaid for them. I don't give a fuck if they overpaid for them because that offensive line improved leaps and bounds from what it was the year before. So I think if he focuses on the defense and, that's his offensive line next season, I think we can see some progress there. So I would give him probably a C+, a little bit higher than Ricky, but, there's some area for improvement moving forward. I do think he's earned a second year for sure. But I'm right there with you, Curtis. When the hire was announced, like, me and you both, we were like, I don't know. Like, this is the guy that was best friends with Scott Fitterer, the office down from him in the same building. We kind of wanted a fresh start, but I think he's made some good decisions, some questionable decisions. He's earned another year, and let's see how it plays out.
All right, JJ, I'm ready for it because I feel like this grade's going to be low. Hit me.
C-. I'm going to start with the grade. And I want to say D+, but I feel like that's just being mean. But the C- is as high as I can go. And the only reason he has a C is because of the offensive line, right? I think his priority was to go out and get, that interior protection for Bryce Young. And they nailed that, by getting the right guard and Robert Hunt, by going to get a left guard and Damian Lewis. They solidified that interior protection. And it had a direct effect on Bryce's play down the stretch, because once he started trusting that, that's when we saw his play ascend. And so he nailed that, right? But the move he made a little prior to, I think, free agency, maybe like a few days or a week or so, was the trade for Deontay Johnson that played out to be kind of a wash, I guess, because we really didn't benefit, or Bryce definitely didn't benefit from having Deontay Johnson as his receiver that we were going to run the offense through. So I think he wasted an acquisition, a transaction, I should say, at the end of the day, for us to really not benefit from that this season or long term. So that was a nothing burger. When you go to the defensive moves he made, somebody mentioned Dane Jackson being a nothing burger. We got nothing from Dane Jackson, nothing productive. I think a win for him was attracting Jadeveon Clowney and convincing him to sign with us. I mean, he had a little bit of the hometown advantage, but he still worked it and won a bidding war, I think, for Clowney and whoever was looking for his services. So I give him credit for that. And I'm not going to go through the list of all the free agents that he signed. I think he was definitely trying to match personnel to his defensive coordinator on defense. I think collectively we can say that the performance of the defense was historically bad, so that really didn't pan out well. But he did, I guess, what he was asked to do. But I think the thing that brings his grade down for me, and honestly, the reason I wanted to give him a D, is because I personally believe in building through the draft, right? And I think we're going to enter his second year without having a solidified starter outside of Jatavian Sanders on offense. And this is the big wild card is still Leggett's development, right? But we're not high enough on him right now, based on the question that was asked moments ago, to just know that he absolutely nailed that with his first pick of his tenure, right? So there's still question marks about his receiver selection. They drafted a running back who had injury history, and I get why they drafted him. I supported the rationale behind, why Brooks was special, but he still came in with an ACL injury, and for him to have the unfortunate reoccurrence of that same injury to the same knee, just basically tells us that we're not going to have him for the 2025 season, basically, right? And so Trevin Wallace, although he was, forced to play early, and I wanted to see him play, I don't know what to think about the scheme right now, but honestly, I wasn't overly impressed by Trevin Wallace's full body of work. I think he flashed at times, but he also is a rookie. But I've seen other rookies in better situations play better, faster, quicker. Edge Cooper, my man Peyton Wilson, I think it is, that came from NC State that went to Pittsburgh. These guys are making plays every time I watch their teams play. And Trevin Wallace.
Hey, none of us wanted Peyton Wilson to be totally fair, though. You guys, we were all talking shit about him on here when we did that mock draft. I know.
I mean, because he don't have any, basically don't have any knees. But he don't. I guess he don't need knees. And so, anyway, I look at, we got nothing out of Crometti. I think Shaw Smith-Wade, showed some flashes, but honestly, it feels like more of the same with the Carolina Panthers draft classes, where it feels like it's going to be another year that if we don't get anything major out of Jonathan Legette and Jatavian Sanders doesn't become like a top 10 tight end somehow, then we're going to look back at this class and wonder, like, why we're not good or have depth 2 years from now. And I think this is what I got to say about Dan Morgan. Ricky knows better than anybody, as far as I'm concerned. I had real problems with them keeping Morgan after they fired Frank Wright, because I don't see him as all that different from Scott Fitterer. I don't care what anybody says. I'm not going to see it differently. I think he was here for those decisions. he signed off on those draft picks and acquisitions in the past. I think that was David Tepper's security blanket in keeping him. And I don't see us as different from any of these other bad ran organizations who are currently getting rid of the coach but keeping the GM. So I think we still did that quasi. And so I think Dan Morgan, he was a pro. I think in his scouting and personnel stops before he got to Carolina, I want to say his strength is in the pro scouting department rather than college scouting. And I think the Carolina Panthers need to get a whole lot better at college scouting and drafting than they do signing free agents. I think he's way better at identifying pro talent than he is at identifying guys we need to draft, and that scares me because I think that's what we need the most to build this team the proper way. And that's why, I've always had reservations about how good he can be, how high his ceiling can be as a GM. I don't think that the way we need to build is his strong suit. So I'll just leave it like that, C-.
Yeah, I'll go with C. I think he did a really good job at fixing the biggest deficiency on this team this past year, and that was the offensive line. But I struggle with what they added defensively. I feel like they neglected that entire side of the ball for the most part, for reasons we talked about already. And then in the draft, I feel like it's a big TBD question mark. Like, we still don't know. And I feel like that's what we've run into in the past in the draft. Like, we're still questioning the picks a year later. And the biggest thing is the Jonathan Brooks. Like JJ said, he's probably not playing next year. So your second round pick that you got in this draft is not going to be. He played 2 games, and it was very limited. And they honestly, and we've talked about this, they handled it pretty well. Like, they slow played. Like Jonathan Brooks said he was ready to roll in that Giants Germany game, and they didn't put him out there because of probably the field conditions there. So I feel like they played it pretty patiently with him, and he's still, freak thing, but tears his ACL again. So that's a massive blunder. JJ brought up a good point with Wallace, and they took in the 3rd round. A lot of people question that, and a lot of people are like, well, Dan Morgan's a linebacker. This guy's going to be still good. And some people thought we reached on him, and I thought he was thrust into his role way too early, and we kind of got to see more of what he could do. And I thought he struggled at times and was in over his head. And maybe that experience is going to help him for this next year if he is thrust into a starter role. But that's a question mark. Crumedy hasn't been up to par. Shaw Smith-Wade at points, I thought, struggled mightily. I get it. He was a 5th round pick. But yeah, this draft has been a big question mark. I do got to give Dan credit. He did get that 2nd round pick they lost this past year back from LA. I think he deserves a little bit of credit there for making that decision. I agree. I think the Deontay Johnson thing was waste. It was wasted. And I get it. They got a couple, 15 picks better in that trade to Baltimore. So I think that was a bad trade on their part. Whether you like 26 or not, I know how JJ feels, but I think he would have been decent as the cornerback 3 for this team this year, and that could have been a little bit more helpful than what they were rolling out there. You got to give him credit for the Jonathan Mingo trade for fleecing Dallas. I don't know what Dallas was thinking there, but he deserves credit on that. I don't think anyone's mentioned that, but for getting a 4th round pick for Mingo is pretty damn good.
Mingo's going to be good.
So yeah, it's just been kind of like an up-down mixed bag, and we're just sitting like, I don't know. I don't know how to feel at this point, but I think C is like middle of the road. And I can see a D. I really could. I can see JJ's point. Like, I don't know. It's tough to say. Ricky, go ahead.
I think the biggest thing that none of us has acknowledged that Dan Morgan did was he told David Tepper, shut the fuck up and let me run this, and Tepper followed suit.
He didn't do that.
Do we know that though? Like, do we know
He did not do
Tepper
that.
followed suit, or he's just quieter about it?
Well,
I promise you, he did not
I
tell
put
Tepper.
like this. I put like this. I probably use more graphic language, but from the two people that I know that work on the inside, some conversations were had that hey, if you want me to fix this toxic mess, you need to kind of let me do this, and you just sit back a little bit. I'm paraphrasing here, but that there was a conversation had with Tepper, Morgan, Tillis, and a couple other people about, if you want this thing to get done right, we kind of need you to just chill in the box and just let us run things. So a conversation was had. That much I do know.
All right. I mean, I don't agree with everyone saying Tepper was in the background as fully as everyone wants to think, but
No.
they can say all they want that it was quiet and not mention him by name, but I do think he was still pulling the strings on a lot of this.
The one player that I think also that Morgan can actually really put like the feather in his cap is probably DJ Wanham, to be honest. Because when you talk about like him being like the pro personnel scout more so than the college scout, those are the kind of roster moves, like finding a DJ Wanham at a team friendly cost, and bringing him in and getting the most out of it. Now that we know that he had the injury, with the scary circumstances of like the recovery and all that process, that's not something any of us can necessarily predict, plan for, or expect, and so it's a nuanced part of that conversation with Wanham and how much value he's brought. But he's a 2-year deal, and he's playing like a guy that's going to be a real contributor on defense. And one thing that the Panthers have to get better at doing is when they bring guys in, they have to be real contributors and not just like come in one game, they're adequate backup players or anything like that. I want guys that make a difference for 16, 17 games a week, right? Like you want guys who come in and make that position better for that football team. And even talking about like the safety room, Xavier Woods isn't this like bum of a football player, but I think everyone is longing to see that position be bolstered and be a weapon for this defense, especially if Ejiro Evero is so skilled on the back end of the defense. And that's where he makes his hay is in the coverages, right? If that's what it is, then we need to get players that he can really do his thing with. I want to see this defense take a step, but it's just going to be difficult, man. They've got a lot of work to do.
I do want to quickly
find
talk.
Kurt Coleman. That's what
Hold
we
on.
need back there.
I know
Exactly.
we got to keep going and keep this moving, but it's a disservice that we do not talk about Canales quickly. Make it short in your response. But how do you think his first year as a coach went? Kevin, I'll start with you. Give me about a minute, nothing too long, of how you think. Oh, and he just dropped out. We'll go to JJ then on, and you got to keep it short. But what do you think of Canales in his first year?
I think ultimately he's going to be judged by how Bryce ended his first season, right? And so I think his ability to bench Bryce and then for Bryce to end up finding his footing under his tutelage and coaching is going to be how he is going to be judged in his first season. I'm not a person who was excited for Canales. I question a lot of his game management, play calling. I won't say play design, but situational play calling. So as a coach of a full football team, I'm not a big fan, right? But I think he was brought in with a particular purpose, and that was to elevate the play of Bryce Young and figure out how to coach, because everybody knew he was really green in terms of experience. So just trying to keep it concise. I think he still has a lot of growing to do as a full football team coach, but I think he achieved this objective in terms of taking Bryce a step beyond where he was when he met him. And so I'll give him his props for that, but I'm not a believer in Canales yet.
Kevin, what about you? What do you think of Dave Canales' first year as a coach?
I think his first year coach, I think he also had his rookie moments. There were some questionable play calling. I think a few times we got too cute when we didn't need to.
Donut.
Few times where we, running the ball good, and all of a sudden we're passing 6 times in a row. But I like I just like the overall foundation that I think Canales has laid. I like the fact that he didn't hesitate about seizing momentum going forward on fourth down, whether it's with the offense or the special teams. There were moments where I was like, yeah, we need to try to seize the moment. Something that don't get talked about enough is, and I know that is the offense coordinator, but the play design. When I go back and watch the all 22 film, I didn't know if you guys follow or keep up with it because I saw it on Twitter. The Panthers were top 10 in yards per separation for wide receivers this year after being bottom 5 last year. And even though offensively we didn't always, quote, explode, but just the fact that guys just seemed a lot more open this year, whether they got targeted or not. We do like freeze frames, at the time that the quarterback throws the ball and you look like, oh, why he didn't see that guy? Oh, that guy open too. I saw a lot of that, in the film. So I think that a lot of that has to do with the play design of Canales, because that was something that he did mention that he wanted to improve with the team, was creating options for wide receivers to get separate to, make it easier for Bryce Young. But I just like his energy. I just like his passion. I just really, I just think there's some things that he does have to improve on. But like I said, he's a rookie head coach, so you take the lumps with it. But I think he's the guy for us.
Bryson, what about you?
Yeah, I think when you look solely at the purpose that he was brought in for, talking about his confidence in Bryce Young in like one of his first interviews, as the Panthers head coach, I think there was obvious progress from Bryce from year 1 to year 2, year 2 being under Canales. So I think that aspect of the head coaching candidacy for Canales in Carolina was successful. I agree with Kevin. There were some rookie moments for Canales in year 1. We talked about it week in and week out with his reluctance to commit to the run, his questionable timeouts, going into half, saving timeouts, questionable decisions, not challenging plays. But, being a head coach, there's a lot that entails of that. He was a play caller for 1 year in Tampa and then was a head coach the next season in Carolina. So I think he's going to learn from his mistakes that he made this season. I was extremely hard on him in year 1. And I think rightfully so for some of the decisions that were made. But if he learns and moves forward and Bryce continues to, show that progress that he showed in year 1 under Canales, then I think, it was a successful year in Carolina for Canales in year 1.
Ricky?
I think he can be a charismatic coach. I think that he's figuring out the importance of balancing everything that happens during a football game and not just the offensive play calling and all of that kind of stuff. First year doing it, I think he'll get better at it. I think that he showed enough with his first 15, pre-scheduled initial drives on offense that he showed that he does have some schematic chops. I think that he can coach. I think he can create appealing concepts that can generate yardage. I think one of the things when we talk about having those separation grades, that's great, but we have nobody that can create after the catch. So we still have some personnel problems with this roster that no matter how open somebody is, once you get the football to them, they have no kind of yak threat afterwards. I mean, that separation is just going to close really quickly and it's going to be wrapped up. And we see that a lot with this Panthers offense. So the next step is getting some dynamic athletes. Dave Canales, I think that he flubbed up on the offseason stuff, not being ready to go in preseason. I think not playing them in preseason was goofy and silly, and I think it was completely avoidable. I think that the handling of Bryce Young in the first couple games is what it is. He made the decision. He stuck to it. I think he could have had maybe some different communication skills throughout the whole staying committed to Andy, not committing to Bryce. I think that some of the wording just seemed a little bit unnecessarily poke the bearish. But you know what? For a first-time head coach, I think he'll get some of that down, and hopefully we'll see an uptick in wins again next season because he did get us 3 more wins. So yeah, I give him a D plus, C minus.
Yeah, some of the knocks for me, and this is kind of reiterating some of Ricky's points. I thought messaging at times lacked. And I thought he could have done a better job of the way he handled some of the questioning about the Bryce Young, Andy Dalton back and forth every week. I give him credit for the benching. As much as it sucked, as much as I hated it at the time, it clearly paid off in the end. And it was not very taken well for a first-year head coach. Like that, there's a lot of things that factor into that. Like this team invested a lot in Bryce Young for him to, bench him after week 2. That takes the brass balls on David Tepper's desk to a whole new level. Like that took a lot to do. So I do give him credit for that. The other knock, and Bryson mentioned it, I struggled with him coming out very early in the offseason saying he was going to be stubborn with the run and then wasn't stubborn with the run at times. So I struggle with that. I do think he got pretty at times when he didn't need to, and we've talked about it. That's the donut reference that we struggled with at times in the game. And like at the end, like I said, like it paid off when those things happened, but there were many times throughout the season where that just didn't happen. But he made some rookie mistakes, but I think he's going to learn from that. And I do think, overall, like someone asked before, like, do you think Dave Canales is working with Bryce when he was on the scout team? I do think that. I do think that Dave was working with him, and I do give him credit for Bryce Young's development and bounce back. I also give a lot of credit to Bryce too, because I think that took a lot from him and for him to get to this point as well, and he deserves credit for that. But Dave Canales deserves credit too. I mean, he's proven to turn around QBs. That's a reason why he was brought here with Geno Smith and Baker Mayfield. So he deserves credit for that. I have hope for the future from where they're at. So we'll see. I mean, it's we don't know where it's going to head. There is alignment finally for this organization, but there's still a long way to go. There's still a 5-12 team. We're still, we were harping on a 5-12 team, and now we're back to that point. We need to get beyond that point. We need to. I mean, this mediocrity we need to get past that. So there's a lot still more work to do for both Canales and Morgan, and I think we're all hoping that happens, and it remains to be seen if it will. Did anyone else need to answer that? I can't even remember if we ran through everyone. We're good. Okay, let's go to this. I know it's hard for me to leave. We got 1,300 people in here listening at midnight, so I appreciate every single one of you guys for tuning in. We're almost growing on almost 3 hours of talking about this, but we got to talk about the free agents. I made this damn graphic. We're not going away until we talk about it. And that is, if I can show it here properly, here we go. So here are the free agents for the Panthers this offseason. And there we go. So we're just going to go down the list, and real quick, I'll run through all you guys, and we don't need explanations. Just you think they're going to be re-signed, or you think they're going to walk and go somewhere else. We'll start with Andy Dalton at the top and work our way down. So, Bryson, your first year, Andy Dalton, you think he's going to re-sign, or you think he's walking?
Walk.
Kevin?
Resign.
Ricky?
Resign.
JJ?
Walk.
You think he walks? Okay. Corbett. We'll go backwards. JJ, you think Corbett, they re-sign him at all?
Walk.
Ricky?
They'll re-sign him.
You think like a one-term deal? We can talk a
Yeah.
little bit here. We don't just need to say one word, but like let's just keep it brief.
Yeah. I think that Corbett actually probably benefited from the fact that Cade Mays never really looked like a big time starter, and that Brady Christensen, his more value is being valuable at multiple positions than being dominant at one. Corbett was very clearly the best center. And I think that coming off the injury, he's going to have a prove it kind of deal, but I think it could benefit both teams, or us and, Corbett's people.
Kev?
I like Corbett, but 3 years,
All right,
three
time's
straight
up. I'm just kidding.
injuries. I think 3 years, 3 straight injuries in particular, even though this one's a bicep, I think he walks
Bryson?
because,
I think Corbett resigns.
Yeah, I think he's back. Brady Christensen, I think he's gone. Bryson?
Gone. 100% gone.
Kev?
gone.
Ricky?
Gone.
JJ?
I hope he stays. I don't know if he will, but I hope he stays.
Oh, I hope he stays too. But yeah, I think the league.
I would prioritize him over Corbett because I think his injury history, I think his versatility is greater because he can back up Icky and center and play center. And yeah, if I had to pick between the two, I would pick him.
All right, let's go to the next one. He doesn't get a name, number 80. JJ, you keep an 80?
No.
Ricky?
No.
Kev?
Hell no.
Bryson?
Fuck no.
Wow, I love this. I love it. Yeah, no way in hell I'm keeping that guy. Felipe Franks, Bryson.
You just gonna skip over Tommy Tremble?
Oh, I didn't. Oh, yes, I did. I'm sorry. Well, we'll go to Felipe. We'll go back to Trumbull after this. Felipe Franks.
No, I'm good.
Really? Huh? Kev?
I saw special teams value. I say,
Yeah. Keep him. All right, Ricky?
Yeah, I think that he's not going to get an opportunity to make a bigger impact on a different team, so you get it for a good price. And he was around the ball a lot on special teams. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
JJ?
A no for me. I can't forgive the drop of the punt pass.
The punt, yep.
I can't forget that.
Oh,
and
I forgot about that.
And I can't forgive the goofy dancing on the play that didn't count. Get that clown off my team, bro.
Oh, all right. Let's go back. Tremble, JJ, Notre Dame guy. This is 100% yes.
It wasn't to begin the year, but because he and Bryce have had chemistry going back to last year. And so I think if Bryce is going to be the guy, I think keeping as many friendly targets for him as you can, is what you should do. And he got versatility that Ian Thomas, we hope that he would bring, but I think he's actually a better version of whatever they think Ian Thomas is.
Ricky?
And if you're getting rid of Ian Thomas, right, especially in this hypothetical, if Ian Thomas is going, if Felipe Franks possibly is going, and you're only keeping Jatavion Sanders, you need a tight end that can block and block well. So you're going to need to keep a Tommy Tremble if you're letting Ian go. So I think Tremble has some value. I think he's got a good rapport with Bryce. I'd keep him.
Kev?
Yeah, definitely keep him. I've been a fan of his from day one. The fact that he got more career touchdowns than Kyle Pitts is something that I rub in the face of Falcon fans often. I think they were drafted the same year. So, yeah, Team Tommy.
Bryson?
Yeah, I'm keeping Trimble, tight end 1 for sure, keeping him. And then Curtis, for you.
Tight end 1? Hold the phone here.
Oh, yeah, tight end 1 for sure.
No way.
To speed this up, who else on this list would you keep?
Hold on. I want to go Tremble, though.
No. I'm saying answer Trimble, and then after Trimble, who else would you keep on the list after Felipe Franks?
That's fair. Before the season, I would say no on Tremble. But I do think he's earned another year. Just with his rapport with Bryce, and I do think he's made some decent plays. I still am not satisfied with this tight end room, though. I still think it's bottom of the barrel, and they need to figure out a way to get these guys more involved because it drives me nuts that they don't have a true blue chip tight end in this room. I think JT Sanders can get there, but he still struggles with blocking. He needs more opportunities in the pass game, and I don't think that's coming. As he's made some splash plays, but there needs to be more opportunity. From this list, I think David Moore sticks around. Just his familiarity with the team. Even I don't know if he'll stay fully on the 53 roster next year, because I do think Carolina is going to add a wide receiver, but I do think wholeheartedly he will be on this team, whether it's practice squad or the full roster. I do think Boone returns if they get rid of Blackshear. Otherwise, this needs to be a conversation with you guys. I don't know if Shaq Thompson comes back. I think he might get some feelers out there from other teams, and I don't know if I want to bank on him coming back and being fully healthy again. I definitely think Mike Jackson is probably going to be re-signed. It sounds like they're very interested in that. I do think they're going to re-sign. If you get rid of Fuller and Scott, which I think is going to happen, you're going to have to at least sign Sam Franklin, and they might even bring back Xavier Woods as much as I don't know if he'll be the starter, but I do think they bring him back because you can't get rid of all four of those guys and not have anyone. So I do think they're going to bring a couple of those guys back, but I do think Fuller and Scott are gone. I would keep Sam Franklin. I like him on special teams. Lonnie Johnson, another special teams guy. I could see them bringing him back. I'm honestly on the fence with Hecker. I've been pretty critical of him. I get he's the all-decade punter, whatever you want to call it. I think he's dropped over the past couple seasons.
Washed.
So I wouldn't mind if they went in a different direction there. I do not want to see Eddie Pinheiro on this team ever again kicking, and I hope they feel the same way. I think we all feel that way, and I think J.J. Jansen is the obvious bring him back. For another 1-year contract. Cade Mays, I think they're going to bring back. Devin Tompkins, I could see as a possibility to bring in as competition. I don't know if he makes the roster. But out of those, and LeBrian Ray, they clearly like LeBrian Ray. I'm not sold on the dude. That whole defense needs to be pretty much wiped. So – yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. Where are you guys with this? Since we're just going to go quickly here. Bryson, out of the rest, who are you keeping?
Yeah,
who do you think's going to come back?
I think Shaq Thompson's returning. He wants to retire a Panther. I think he's going to take another team-friendly deal to prove that he can be healthy. So I think Shaq's coming back. I think I agree Mike Jackson coming back really kind of was a surprise for this team. Trading a 7th-round linebacker for him and him playing pretty well in that starting cornerback position opposite of J.C. Horn. Sam Franklin would be the next name on the list. Bring him back, team captain, special teams, and J.J. Jansen. Skipped over Lonnie Johnson as well, who was a pretty electric player on that special teams unit. I agree. You move on from Johnny Hecker. You move on from Eddie Pinheiro. At the punter and kicker, you got to address those positions in the offseason. Other than that, the other names on the list really don't do anything for me. Devin Tompkins, I'm a fan of. They didn't really involve him at a high level in this offense, but I do know he has familiarity with Canales, so possibly bringing him back and maybe getting him involved at a higher level, I don't know. But other than that, no other names really strike me in a way to bring them back for this team in 2025.
Kev, where are you at with this list?
With this list, definitely bring back David Moore. I know he had a couple of oopsies, but he also came up just as clutch. Definitely a fan of bringing Shaq Thompson back. I think we've learned a lot about culture guys that are, kind of rushed out of here before their time. I think he has earned the right to come back and prove himself. definitely a big fan of Mike Jack. I mentioned him earlier. Um, Also, Sam Franklin. I was one of a few people early on. Saw the value of Sam Franklin on Twitter, caught hell about it. Now everybody's Sam Franklin fans, and I kind of like, y'all late. Um,
I do
far
remember that,
as
Kevin. I do remember that. You were one of the very first ones to compliment his play on special teams.
Yeah, but he's got to quit the stupid penalties. He does.
But the attitude he brings, Kevin was on that like day one, so got to give him props for that.
Yeah, got to let the dogs bite every once in a while, Curtis. But as far as Hecker and Pinheiro, bring in some strong competition. I wouldn't necessarily say just get rid of them flat outright.
Pinheiro? Are you high? Like, come on, dude. Pinheiro is terrible. And that's coming from a guy who didn't mind him last year. Like, I mean, he's terrible. He's really bad.
Yeah, you can always take a fly on one of these guys from college, but I mean, for the most part, that's just my opinion. As far as the rest here, I like LeBron Ray as D-line depth. He shows some versatility. He's great at disengaging blocks. Wooten was filled in, I felt like decent backup linebacker, but definitely on special teams. Definitely bring back Rasheem Blackshear. That last game, he was at 11 yards per carry. I think he had like 5-6 carries. Filling in for Chuba Hubbard that was out. I've always been a fan of his as well, so that's what I think.
Ricky?
There's about 7 names maybe on that list that I'd be interested in keeping. I won't even really go into it. 6, 7, maybe 5. Everyone else just move on. I mean, look, we're not that terrific of a football team. I love the idea of keeping guys that matter. And I think that you can keep the 2 or 3 guys that matter and that also make you a halfway decent football team on this list. And then also sign JJ Jansen because there's no reason not to. And not Nick Scott. That's probably what I would do.
And Ricky, you can get out of here. You get some
Ricky,
rest.
I fucking love you, man. Ricky, you're so funny, dude.
I see you guys. Sorry that I don't have any longer in me. I ran out of tea. I drank an entire Yeti of hot tea sitting here doing this. So now
you're
I'm just gonna go
man.
pass out.
Yeah, you're a champ, dude.
JJ, Kev, good seeing y'all, man. Curtis and Bryson next time.
Get some rest, man. See you later. JJ, out of this list, who do you like?
David Moore, because I saw going back to training camp that he definitely has rapport with Bryce. Bryce trusts him on some of the deeper throws and even on some of the quick slants. Like I love that touchdown he had to him late in the game versus Atlanta. And so I like anybody who's friendly to Bryce. If Bryce is going to be the guy, keep the guys that he has rapport with. David Moore for sure. No Mike Boone, no Deshaun Williams. Cam Gill is kind of intriguing for depth. I like why they like him. And so if they can keep him on practice squad or something like that, then yeah. I'm out on Shaq Thompson. And I like Shaq. I respect Shaq, OG status, all that. But as y'all know, I'm not big on nostalgia and I'm not big on linebackers that's over 30. And I think they're a lot like running backs. And he is no Bobby Wagner type, that is really going to give you a lot of production at an older age. And the other reason why I want to move on from him is because I think his being on the roster, because of his impact, his leadership, he's always going to find himself in the starting lineup, and I think it hinders us from trying to get better at that position. I think we really need to focus on getting younger, faster, more proficient, and there might be a reason why we didn't prioritize somebody like Edge Cooper this past draft. So I'm just ready to move on from the Shaq Thompson era. I like Mike Jackson as for the reasons that Kevin mentioned earlier. Great production as a cornerback too. I think there's value there opposite of JC. Caleb Farley could go either way on him. I'm really ready to move on from the whole safety room. I wasn't as impressed with Xavier Woods as I had been in previous years, and
he's just falling off.
Yeah, he's just getting older. I want to get younger, more dynamic, better playmakers, more physical guys, guys that that are more ideal for those positions. So skip past all these safeties that actually play. Stan Franklin, I don't have a problem with bringing him back. Same thing with Lonnie Johnson. They can be our top special teams guys. Moving on from Johnny Hecker, another older guy that's just bringing up the average age on our roster, which we don't need, while we are growing. Eddie P, man, I don't want to see Eddie P back on this team again ever. I hate to say this. I mean, I have no real ill will against another Notre Dame guy, JJ Jansen. But, kind of getting bored with the cart talk. I mean, he plays well. I'm tired of it being gimmicky in Carolina, bro. He plays his position well, but I think even for the position that he plays, it's not like we can't find another long snapper. Like, come on, man, let's get past this whole.
Bro, you coming?
And
you don't remember that, bro? You coming?
What was that?
Matt Rule, 6th round pick.
Oh yeah. Thomas Fletcher. No, I wouldn't go draft a Thomas Fletcher type. But I would definitely see if there's another long snapper who can play for the Carolina Panthers. Like, come on, bro. Like, we tired of seeing the same gimmick every year, and he getting the mic, and it's so gimmicky to me. I'm just tired of that. So anyway, that's probably like just a little hater in me. Don't feel anything for LeBron Ray. Wooten, same thing. Oh yeah, JJ on JJ Crime. I'm sorry. Notre Dame too. So it's just old to me. K Mays potentially. I think he still adds some depth, and we still need depth on the offensive line unless we can find a better replacement. Devin Tompkins. No, we can get better there. Same thing with Raheem Blackshear. I hate to say it, but Rasheem Blackshear, I think he missed his opportunity to ascend to a more prominent role within this offense. And that's not any fault of his own, but I think getting caught up in the situation last year with Frank Reich and the offense as it was, I think he got buried last year because of Mike Sanders. I mean, not Mike Sanders, but Miles Sanders. And so I think that is just unfortunate for him. Velus Jones, I like the potential, but if he didn't give us anything this year, why bring him back? And then same thing for Dan Chisena. I mean, I'm good. I'm good on the rest of the guys, man. I just let it be that.
Cheers to Alex, $4.99. We do appreciate it. I agree with you on Shaq Thompson, and I mean, I got the guy's jersey in my closet. Big Shaq Thompson guy, but I think it's time. We need
people treat him like he's Thomas Davis, and he's not. So stop it. Let's move on. Let's get better. Let's get faster. Let's get more dynamic.
There was one other note I wanted to mention.
I don't agree with you guys. I do not agree.
I know, and that's crazy because you were not sold on him completely a couple years ago, and now the tables have turned. I'm kind of shocked, actually.
What's the option behind him?
I think it's time. You need to give
Trevin Wallace
and Josie Jewell. I think that's
Josie Jewell for sure. But
do that Dan Morgan pick another one. It's time to go back to the well. I think we can get better than Trevin Wallace too. I think Trevin Wallace should be the guy rotating in at this point. I think another line back in the draft.
I don't agree with spending resources on that position when you have a player that has shown the ability.
I don't think you need to. I think
Bryson, you can't trust him. Man.
I think Trevin's the guy going in. They invested a 3rd round pick in him, and I think Dan Morgan thinks highly of him, and I do think he took lumps this year, but I also think that's going to benefit him this upcoming season in the long run, where he can play in that role, and he's not the guy with getting the plays called into him when Josie Jewell was out. He can kind of learn from him too, and I think that's what they were thinking of when they were drafting him. They just didn't think Shaq was going to go down. I do think he's going to be the starter going in this year. I would be shocked if he isn't. But
And Bryson, and the other thing, I mean, like I said, I hate it when it comes to Shaq because we love him, as a fan base. But at the same time, like, this is his second consecutive year where we lost him for like the full year. And so, like, if you can't trust him being available at 30 plus and then asking him to come back and be like a entrenched starter, I just think it sets us back even further. Like, we really need to start putting guys in place that can, like, be guys for years to come. And I think, just relying on the fact that we don't have to address that position is kind of the reason why we in the position we in right now at linebacker. And so I'm just ready to, like, find the heir apparent to whatever Shaq has been for us.
No, I get that for sure, but like I'm just like he's a player that's going to take a team discount. Like he's given hints about that. He wants to retire a Panther. I think when he's on the field and he's healthy, he is a higher level than what Carolina has available at that linebacker position. Leader in the locker room. I don't know. I don't think spending additional draft resource or free agency money to that position is necessary when you have a player that's willing to take less to stay. But yeah, I mean, I think if we would have drafted Edgerrin Cooper in round 2, like we wanted during our mock draft, then we wouldn't even be having this conversation. So, I think a lot of these issues that we're having are, unfortunately self-inflictive, and unfortunately this is the position that we're in. So I would keep him at a discount just and hope that he is healthy. You could say the same thing about JC Horn, 2 years in a row, injury concerns, and we saw what happened this year when he was healthy on the field and a high level player. Obviously Shaq Thompson's older, but I think Shaq Thompson can play at a high level still, and hopefully that's for Carolina, in my opinion.
All right, moving this forward. Hold on, moving this forward. I know we can go back and forth on this, but we haven't touched something that I'm shocked we haven't got to yet. And I'm sorry, I know this is going super long. Bryson's going to kick my ass, but we need to talk about Garrett Wilson because he popped up this week. It's probably a pipe dream, but we need to discuss it here. And I made a graphic, so we're going to talk about it, damn it. So Bland put this out this week. Shout out to Bland. He posted a video, Bryce, and said he might be better than we thought. Garrett Wilson slid into the replies, said he is. Connor Hughes said he remembers talking to Garrett about Young back in the Jets locker room in October, and he was adamant he was a player, said everyone was going to see. I may or may not have rolled my eyes, and Garrett Wilson was spot on. Jordan Schultz was noticed it too. He screenshotted it, said Wilson is a fan of Bryce Young. We've seen, I think several people have put out polls on this, and I wanted to get your guys' take. What would you give up to get Garrett Wilson? And JJ, I'll let you fire away on this.
This was being discussed on the timeline yesterday. I think what I would offer New York is a second and a fourth. I think that's fair compensation for a guy who is obviously in this position because he's disgruntled. He doesn't trust the organization, and he wants out. So I think that plays in our favor in terms of leverage, and we should try to just offer them something that is enticing enough for them to take. Up front, I wouldn't offer them our first because our first is too high. But a second and a fourth package. If they want more than that, then I think we'll get into the deal where we're doing pick swaps for like third, fourth rounders and stuff like that, in the future for a future year or something. But definitely a second. And I would start with the second and the fourth and see if they bite. And I think what we have to do as well is we'll offer a second and a fourth, and then we'll let Garrett Wilson's camp know that we're willing to do a contract with him.
Yeah, I think that's fair, and I think that's a good starting point. In Carolina, we have to eventually be the person that kind of sets the standard for the trade value and not let other teams dictate what they're willing to do. So I think a second or fourth would be amazing if they could get that done. But I'll read the tweet that I sent out when kind of this stuff happened. And shout out to Curtis. That's a great graphic, probably one of his better graphics. But not sure what the trade package would look like for Garrett Wilson, but whatever it is, yes. I think Garrett Wilson is a extremely high level talent at wide receiver in the position, young talent, unlike the guy we were just talking about in Shaq Thompson. But this is a guy who would immediately come in to be wide receiver one, probably one of the best wide receivers Carolina has had since Steve Smith, prime Steve Smith. So I think if it takes the first round pick for Carolina this season, I would do it. I wouldn't have any hesitations with that. I understand the defense needs help. You invest the rest of that draft in defense. You invest free agency money in defense. You restructure some contracts, extend people, get more free agency money to spend. But Garrett Wilson is a difference maker, man. We saw what he did with quarterbacks like Zach Wilson, Aaron Rodgers at the end of his career. Like, this man has played with awful quarterbacks and has shown the ability on the field to be an elite high-level wide receiver one. So if he's truly interested in being in Carolina, he's replying to Blaine. We see the Jordan Schultz tweet. Like, get him here, whatever it takes, and give Bryce Young that true difference maker at the wide receiver position that other teams have to game plan for, because we don't have that right now. Like, Adam Thielen is good, but he's going to be 35 years old. He struggles with separation. He can catch pretty much anything that's thrown at him if he's covered or not, but you need a wide receiver that other teams have to game plan for, and I think Garrett Wilson is that, and I think he would be spectacular in Carolina. Bryce Young will be feeding him the ball. I know the guy on Twitter that does the Underdog Sports. His name's slipping my mind, but he's a Panthers fan as well.
Josh,
yeah. He tweeted at Garrett Wilson, was like, Bryce would feed you the ball, man. Like, that is so true. Like, he would be the new Adam Thielen. Even if Adam Thielen was still on the team, like, Bryce would make it a priority to get Garrett Wilson the ball. And I know that's what he wants too. I think there were some kind of unhappiness for Garrett Wilson in New York this season with them adding Devontae Adams and Alan Lazard and kind of Aaron Rodgers favoring those guys over Garrett Wilson. But I think he would be a great fit in Carolina. Obviously, like I said, one of the better receivers that we've had ever in Carolina. And I think it's worth the first round pick if that's what it takes.
Well, you'll do it
JJ,
first?
I would.
JJ, what did you say? Because I missed it. I had to step out.
Well, I said I would offer a second and a fourth.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at, like the Sam Darnold special. Second and a four. This thing that sucks, and like Carolina, when we were sitting in October, I was like, man, they're going to get a high second from the Rams. And then the Rams just went on this run, and here we are, and they're going to get like a 20th pick in the second round. So honestly, I don't think it's going to happen. I think it's a pipe dream. What I would do is second and a four. Carolina doesn't have a high second. They gave it away to Chicago. I do think if it was a high second, like the top 5 pick in the second round, I do think there would be a possibility they could like Carolina's got a lot of 4th round picks. They have, I think, 3 4th round picks this year. They have a couple 5ths. I think they could package something together to get him. But that second being late, I think, is just too much. I am not. They have way too many holes to give up that 1st round pick, personally, I think. And I don't think they're a wide receiver away. So that's the problem I have. They just have way too many holes on this team where, and granted, you got to hit on these picks. I get that. Like, you need to nail these picks. Like, this pick at 8 needs to be a blue chip 10-year pro in this league. Like, you need to nail this pick. You can't fuck it up. But if they could get him for a 2nd and 4, I'd be all for it. I do think there's other free agents out there, T. Higgins, where you got to pay a lot to get them, but you're not giving up picks to get them. And I think that's a little bit easier to swallow than giving up your 1st rounder when you have too many damn holes on this team. So we quickly talked about that. Let's just talk for a second here, and then I'm going to get out of here because I know it's late. And I've been saying that.
No, bro, I'm jacked up. I'm like,
we got to talk quickly because Zach, he gave us a super chat, and I gotta, granted, I'm not gonna lie to the dude. He talked about Garrett Wilson. We talked about that. He's talked about Abdul Carter, Kenneth Grant, Jared Wilson. So I just want to talk quickly because someone also asked in our last episode, and this is, and I don't know how to spell, so give me a second. Let me fix this. But let's talk for a minute about the draft. Just, it doesn't have to be long. But just some guys you guys are curious about at that first pick at 8. I think they were at maybe 6 or 5 before this past week. So they dropped a couple spots. But who do you think realistically will be there for them that you'd be interested in taking at 8? Bryson, start with you.
Yeah, I think wide receivers like Ted McMillan will be there at 8. I'm interested in him. I think he was, if not the best, one of the best wide receivers in college football this season. I think your edge defenders, Jalen Walker. I don't know if Abdul Carter is going to be there at 8. I think he's probably the best edge defender in this draft, and I don't know if he slips that far. But Mason Graham, you can kiss him goodbye. He's not going to be there at 8. I think he's going to get drafted in the top 5. Malachi Starks, the safety from Georgia, I think he could be there at 8. That would be interesting to me for an office and coaching staff that has been pretty vocal about wanting to improve that safety room. I think that would be an interesting draft pick. But, if I was drafting there, I'd go BPA. Whoever's sitting there at 8, the best player on our board overall, I'm taking that player because I think Bryce Young playing to the ability that he did this season allows you to do that. So whether that's a defensive player or an offensive player, I'm going best player available at 8 and just rolling with it. So unless that pick is traded for Garrett Wilson, I'm fine with that. I know you guys aren't, but if that's what it takes to get Garrett Wilson on the team, then that's my first round pick. But if you keep your first round pick, you go BPA and roll with that.
I'll tell you what, before he goes, if Abdul Carter somehow is there at 8, that pick better be in within 10 seconds. Because there are a lot of analysts who have said he is the number 1 defensive player in this draft. And I agree with that from what I've seen. And where they have the holes on that defense, if you can go out and get that guy at 8, who probably won't be there, would be outstanding. And sometimes you need a little luck. And there are guys that do drop in this draft sometimes. Do I think it's going to be him? Probably not. But if he is there at 8, I think they would be crazy if they didn't draft him. Also, quickly, I've heard some rumblings for some folks that Carolina is interested in Ted. Take that for what you will. But I have heard there has been interest in him at the wide receiver spot. So I thought that was interesting to me, and thought I'd share that with you guys. JJ, I want to get your take, though, on Malachi, because I know you were talking. I saw you talking about him on the timeline. A little bit too rich for you at that spot at 8?
Yeah, I live about 35 minutes from Athens. And so, I go to the Raising Cane's, and Malachi Starks is, on posters in Raising Cane's, in my local Raising Cane's. So, he's a guy around here, and but so are the other Georgia guys, right? I'm in dog country, and I see a lot of them play. I would say this: Malachi Starks made one of the best defensive plays that I saw this year, that I've seen this year, when he made the interception versus Clemson, first game of the year, right? And he jumped on everybody's radar. I have seen Georgia play a lot of other games where I don't feel like he flashed as much as I would have liked for him to flash, but obviously the talent is there. So I think he's worthy of a first round pick, for sure, but he's not like a Kyle Hamilton type difference maker. Malachi Starks is the type of guy that I would pick in the first round if we were to trade back. Say
15 to 20.
Yeah, somewhere between 12 and 20, right? Because what the thing I see playing out is, or potentially playing out, is both of those top 2 quarterbacks don't get drafted, right? Or something like Drew Allard.
We need them to go high.
Yeah, we need them to go high just to push the talent back to us. But let's say one of them doesn't get drafted, and here is Carolina on the clock, and Cam Ward is still available, right? And the team wants to come up to get him, and but they're coming up from like 13, right? I think if it's a situation where we move back to 13 and Malachi Starks is the best player available at 13, then I would draft him. But if I'm sticking at number 8 for guys that I think realistically could be there, because at 8, I think Mason Graham is better than number 8. I think Abdul Carter is better than number 8. The guys that I've been kind of like focusing on and shifting my expectations to is Jalen Walker, Georgia, Michael Williams, Georgia, Nick Scouton from A&M, Texas A&M. He's on my list. Ted is on my list because he's a top 10 talent. But I'm focused on the defensive side this year. So my top 3 would be Jalen Walker, Scouton, if he's still around at 8, and Michael Williams, because I think Carolina needs a difference maker on defense. The only thing that concerns me about Scouton is he's kind of like a hybrid edge interior guy. And because of who our defensive coordinator is, I don't know how he would utilize him. So that concerns me. But one thing that we found out this year, and this is for everybody listening, the main draft guys and the guys who really that I trust, to tell me about scouts, tell me about prospects, is they're saying that speed to power, but power rushers are important. If you look at what Jared Verse did this year for the Rams, that's a lot easier to work with in the league than just a speed guy. And so I want guys whose speed to power, pass rushing ability is there from day one, because I think you get production out of them. So that's what I'm focused on. I think this is a great draft to be drafting for defense, because I think there's going to be some talent in the early second as well that that would be normally first round edge type guys and interior guys. So I think with all that being said, if I'm Dan Morgan, I would definitely entertain trading back, and like within the top 15, because I think there will be opportunities to get really good defensive guys up to around 15. I think after 15, there's a drop off. And so I would be willing to entertain people moving up, because somebody may even want to move up and get Ted or somebody like that. And as long as I don't have to move back to where I'm out of range of Starks, Scouting, the whole gamut of guys that I just mentioned, if 4 of those guys are on the board and I'm only moving back 3 spots, then I'm taking that trade, and I'm picking the best guy that's still there when I pick. And so because at 8 you're kind of getting out of the blue chip category, you're on the fringe of that, and I think everybody in that 8 to 15 is kind of similar in terms of talent. So I'm entertaining all options. If I have a favorite amongst that group, just based on what I've seen with my own eyes, it's Jalen Walker. Like every time I watch Georgia, like the guy was wrecking games, and and Carolina needs a game record. We haven't had that in a long time.
And when's the last time they drafted a Georgia player? But I agree with you. I think you can't go wrong with any of the Georgia guys. I truly like Michael Williams and Jalen Walker, and Walker over him, to be honest with you. And I think either one of those guys there would add value to this defense. I think Tet is another option if they end up going heavy defense in free agency, and they might. We'll see what happens. But I think any 3 of those guys would make a difference for this team. I do think it's interesting when you were talking about that second round pick, with them having so many 4th rounders. I would not doubt in my mind them trying to trade up in the second round and using a couple of those fourths and that second round pick they got from the Rams to get up high in that second round and go get another guy. I could see that from Dan Morgan. And that would help, because I think the Rams, the best they could finish is like 20th from where their spot is. So yeah. I do think we'll see. I don't think Dan's afraid not to trade. He's been behind Scott Fitter, who traded every fucking which way he could. So, but yeah, there's some corners out there I think are interesting. You liked Michigan when Harbaugh was there, but a Will Johnson, I don't know a ton about. Like, I don't, and I told Ricky this. I don't fully dive into the draft until after the season. I watch college football, but I'm not sitting there studying the guys when I'm watching the games about college football until after the season. But there's some corners out there too that I think could make a big difference opposite JC.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big Will Johnson fan. You know, obviously I watched him a lot when Harbaugh was there. I'm a big Ben Morrison fan from Notre Dame. I think he's the best cornerback in the draft. He's just not healthy right now. But I do believe if we're going to stick with Evero, I think it's more about being able to create pressure. And JC is great, bro. Like, you know, we got one. And if we extend him, we're in good hands with JC on one side. Mike Jackson coming back and being in the second year of that defense, I think he's going to get better. We need more corners, more outside corner depth and all that. But I think we're good at corner, too good to prioritize one of those guys, even though I love Ben Morrison and Will Johnson. I think the better our pass rush gets, the better the secondary, the corners we have become. And so I think getting pressure in the quarterback, him having to let go of the ball faster, I think that works into the advantage of JC and Mike Jackson. So we really got to go edge, bro. Like, I mean, I don't know what they're going to do, but we got to go with somebody who's going to generate QB pressures at a higher clip than what we currently get.
All right, let's leave it there. Let me bring this bets up. Bryce is about to leave here, but I got to bring these bets up for the wild card weekend. We do this every week. Ricky's not here, but I'll do the best I can with this. So here's our parlay this week for the wild card weekend. Bryson, you want to go? Why did you pick John Mechie? Hopefully Alex is still in here. I don't know if Alex dipped out or not. It might be past his bedtime. But why did you pick Mechie this weekend?
Yeah, last 5 out of the last 6 weeks, he's hit that over. That 1 week he didn't, and he got 16 yards, so 0.5 under. It's the playoffs. I think, the Texans are going to be trying to score and win the game, obviously. So I think Mechie 16.5 is that could be one catch for Mechie. He is a deep threat. So I think 16.5 is really low for me for Mechie, and I think that's pretty safe for him to achieve in the playoffs at that position.
Man, we like our minus 10 odds, minus 110 odds. I swear, like every week. That's all we pick. Ricky went with Nico Collins. I'll just check his stats here real quick. So 84.5. That is pretty steep, but Ricky, I think, is basing it off of the playoffs and him being, CJ Stroud's number one. You also lose one of his top talents the last couple of weeks in Tank Dell. So I think Ricky is – oh, wow. Alex likes my pick for one. So going to Land McConkey, I think he is going to be Herbert's outlet in this matchup. He has hit this 6 of the last 7 and pretty well over that number. So I thought this was pretty low for him. And I think he's going to get a ton of catches. I know Johnston's out there, but that guy is so up and down in a roller coaster at wide receiver for the Chargers that you really don't know what he's going to get. My only concern with that is if, Harbaugh just goes full on, let's run the ball and play, smash mouth football and doesn't throw a lot. But I do think Ladd's going to get a ton of opportunities in this game this weekend against the Texans. So I'm all over this.
You need to be concerned with Stingley shadowing him. That would be my pick.
Yeah, thanks for knocking my pick. I appreciate it. I'm trying to get people to take this parlay, damn it. But no, I think Ladd's a special player. I don't care who's covering him. I think he's has showed out this year, even against some premier corners in this league. I mean, Patriots have some good corners. He put up 94 against Gonzalez and some of them. So
I love it. I think he can hit that number. I mean, I honestly do. I'm just concerned that Stingley.
No, I needed my rebuttal. Damn it. So this is our parlay this week. We'll be doing this throughout the playoffs, even when we're not doing episodes. If you guys are interested in sports betting, please use our link at signupexpert.com/Panthers. Use that link. You can sign up for any of the sports books available in your area, and you do not have to download any apps. You can use that link directly. It'll sign you up, and you can start betting. They're all doing a bunch of giveaways this time of year with the playoffs. Bet 5, get 115 bonus bets. I know Bet365 does that a lot. So please use our designated link. We appreciate it. Again, we thank everyone for sticking with us. I still got to upload this damn episode to YouTube. It's going to take forever. 3 hours, 40 minutes. We're almost going out 4 hours. I was pretty damn close to my projection of how long this is going to take. But 12:48 at night, and we got 1,400 people still listening. You guys are dedicated. We appreciate it. Thank you so much, JJ. Thank you. Thank you, Edgar, for coming on. Kevin, for taking time out of your workday. Ricky, for sticking it out when he's sicker than hell on his deathbed. Bryson, for sticking it out with his whiskey and beer. We appreciate every single one of you guys. Thank you so much. We will probably take a couple weeks off, but we will be back to talk free agency. We'll be back to talk the draft, bring you guys the latest. And until then, keep pounding.
Go Irish.
Don't go Irish.